Chapter 672. As they walked down the bluestone stairs, a wide passageway gradually appeared in front of Yin Nuoxing and the others. Unlike what he had imagined, the passageway in this maze was not man-made. Instead, it was a natural earthen passageway. On the brown walls, there was a crystal lamp hanging at intervals or a piece of crystal embedded in the ceiling. The edges and corners of the passageway were also emitting a faint glow. Even though they were underground, it was still very bright. The passageway was very wide. It would not be a problem for more than 10 people to walk side by side. Behind them, there was a continuous stream of people pouring in from the bluestone stairs, but they did not fill up the huge passageway. The huge stream of people dispersed in a bustling manner. It did not seem crowded at all. It seemed that no matter how many people there were, it would not be enough to fill up this underground world. Even though it's an underground maze, everyone seems to be walking with a purpose. Yin Nuoxing stopped and looked at the people walking with a strong sense of purpose. She could not help but smack her lips. That's because this is only the first level. Newcomers, after many years of exploring the maze, there is basically no danger before the 9th level. Even a little guy at the immortal level can roll around in there. A middle-aged man who also stopped beside her could not help but laugh when he heard Yin Nuoxing muttering to herself. He glanced at Yin Nuoxing and the others. Although he was a little curious about these, for little girls, he also knew that the people who could come here were not simple characters. He only chuckled and said, "However, there are unexplored areas on every level. In other words, places that have not been explored. There are no signs on the map. If you rashly barge in, you might get lost. Newcomers, be careful. It's best not to leave the marked areas. There are many things buried in every corner of the maze. Mysterious crystals are just one of them. However, most of the people who come in now are going after the 15th level of the maze. After all, it is rare for the maze to be quiet during this period of time. Thank you for the reminder." Yin Nuoxing smiled and cupped her hands. The middle-aged man also laughed and waved his hand. Then he led the few people beside him and walked into the maze with the crowd. There was only one path in front of them for the time being. Yin Nuoxing stood in place, looked at Xian, Little Moon, and Yuer, and then walked towards the only path. The underground world was very spacious and empty. Glimmers of light filled every corner and illuminated the entire underground world. Yin Nuoxing and the others followed the huge crowd and walked aimlessly in the underground world. Occasionally, they would stop at a fork in the road and take a look at the map from their rings. Then, they would naturally leave a soul mark and head towards the 2nd floor. At some point in time, Yin Nuo Planet suddenly noticed that the underground world had become much wider. It had changed from a tunnel that was more than 10 feet tall to an underground car's cave that was more than 1,000 feet tall. There were huge stalactites hanging down everywhere. There were also water droplets dripping from the tips of the stalactites. A clear echo echoed in the car's cave. Unknowingly, only a few dozen people were left out of the tens of thousands of people. Perhaps everyone had split up with different goals at the many forks in the road. The maze was very quiet. Occasionally, a magic array would appear, but only the magic array would appear. Strangely, it did not operate, which gave the few dozen experts in front of fright. The core of the magic array has stopped operating. Is it still? Yin Nuoxing looked at the magic array that appeared in surprise. This magic array was 1,000 feet in size and was right on the ground that they had to pass through. However, no matter how many people stepped on it, it did not operate. He could also see some clues from the magic array. Brother Yin, look at this." Yuer's voice came from the side, causing Yin Nuoxing to turn around curiously. Then he was stunned. There was a huge hole in the stone wall at the side. It seemed to be another path, and in that tunnel stood a magical beast formed from earth. It was obviously an earth elemental creature. However, that magical beast only stood there quietly and did not react at all. Yuer even poked and shook it with her little hand out of curiosity, but it did not react at all. Yin Nuoxing quickly pulled her back to his side and patted her head. He smiled bitterly and said, "Don't run around." "Okay," Yuer giggled and pursed her lips when she heard that. As for whether she took his advice seriously, it was unknown. Yin Nuoxing was speechless when he saw her indifferent and lively appearance. Yin Nuoxing frowned as she glanced at the indifferent earth elemental creature. This earth elemental creature should have been derived from the array. However, there was no movement from it. Perhaps the array that created this elemental creature had also stopped operating. They followed the group around and came to an entrance that looked like an underground cave. It was pitch black below, and nothing could be seen. However, everyone jumped down with ease. Yin Nuoxing heard the sound of clothes rubbing against each other and a series of collisions. It sounded like the sound of a body suddenly hitting the wall. This sound only subsided after 2 or 3 times. After listening to the people at the side, Yin Nuoxing realized that this was the shortcut to the second level. It could be considered a shortcut. The normal path to the second level is very long. There are many underground caves like this in the underground maze that can quickly and efficiently lead to the next level. However, you have to protect your body when you jump down. You can't see anything inside. It won't look good if your face is scratched. The people at the side looked at Yin Nuoxing and the other girls and couldn't help but tease them while they were informing him. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and didn't care about anything. It was fine as long as they didn't provoke him. After waiting for a while, when everyone had jumped down and only they were left, Yin Nuoxing thought for a while and lowered his head to look at Little Moon and Little Moon. After a while, he pulled the 2 girls into his arms and threw out a chain to tie Xian behind him. He propped up an energy barrier and jumped into the underground cave as well. After jumping into the underground cave, Yin Nuoxing finally understood why those people said that he had to protect his body. In a place where he couldn't even see his own fingers, he felt that the energy barrier had experienced more than 10 collisions in the narrow and dark tunnel in just 5 seconds. It was as if he was passing through an invisible tunnel full of obstacles. He bumped into things here and there, and if he didn't have the energy barrier to protect him, he might have a bloody nose and a swollen face. In the midst of the chaos, Yin Nuoxing felt his face and neck being nervously hugged by a few soft jade-like arms, and there were also 2 small and delicate bodies trembling in his embrace. That soft touch made his mind fly beyond the 9 heavens, and he hurriedly said in his heart, "Everything is fine. Everything is fine." 1 minute felt as long as a century. Finally, there was light in front of his eyes. Then, Yin Nuoxing saw that they were sliding down a huge slope that was hundreds of meters long. The new place in front of him was hundreds of meters high and surrounded by very flat and huge stone walls. The glimmering light shone on this huge underground cave. After sliding down for a while, they finally reached the bottom of the slope. Yin Nuoxing stood up with the 3 girls in his arms. He only felt that his buttocks were close to the ground, and it was a little hot. This is the second level? Standing at the bottom of the slope, Yin Nuoxing looked around. On the tall walls to the side, there were some high-grade, mysterious crystals inlaid. The surging light of energy was very dazzling. It's much bigger than the first floor. This underground world doesn't seem to be man-made, nor does it seem to be formed naturally. Xian also looked around this huge underground cavern. Her jade-like hand touched her perky, but without leaving a trace. Yin Nuoxing stood beside her and caught a glimpse of her movements. He couldn't help but blush slightly. He coughed dryly, then took a deep breath and looked around. There was no one at the bottom of the slope. Those who jumped down first seemed to have gone far away. However, Yin Nuoxing wasn't too worried about getting lost. The ring that Jin Huan gave him contained a map of this huge underground maze. However, what was drawn on it was only the known areas that had been explored. Waving his hand, Yin Nuoxing led Xian and the other 2 girls forward casually. After going deeper for a while, Yin Nuoxing stopped. He sat on the ground and started a small bonfire. He smiled and said, "Let's take a break for now. We'll move forward when Lin Sheng and the others come over." Xian smiled and nodded. Yin Nuoxing also smiled slightly. Then, his smile suddenly disappeared and he became calm. The former was slightly taken aback. Then, "Friends who are following behind me, can you come out and say something? You're about to lose your patience, right?" Yin Nuoxing's indifferent voice made Xian and Mei Mao freeze slightly. Her jade-like hand grasped the dragon cry, sword in her hand like lightning. She pulled Little Moon and Ewer to her side. Maimao looked around vigilantly. Her sharp gaze swept across like a blade. Just as Yin Nuoxing finished speaking, there was suddenly the sound of rushing wind. A sharp gust of wind whistled through the air, creating an ear-piercing noise. The sand and stones on the ground were swept up. Yin Nuoxing's colorful eyes narrowed slightly. The figure that was sitting lazily on the ground didn't move. His eyes slightly raised, and an energy barrier rose from the ground. Faint purple flames lingered around it. Just as the flame barrier rose, a black arrow as thick as an arm ruthlessly shot through it. It rushed into the flame barrier, and the energy contained in it was completely devoured by the flames. After passing through the barrier, it lost its power and fell in front of Yin Nuoxing and the others. He picked up the arrow that had fallen in front of him with 2 fingers. Then, he turned his head. There was also the sound of rushing wind behind him. Then, 6 figures appeared on the boulder behind him. They leaned against the wall, and 6 pairs of eyes filled with killing intent locked onto them. 6 demigod experts. You're quite bold. Let me guess. Are you Qi Yao's men, or the idiotic young master of the Xianin sect? Or are you assassins that were hired to sell your lives? Oh, you didn't even carry out the assassination. You should be someone else's men. Yin Nuoxing's eyes narrowed slightly as he swept his indifferent gaze across the 6 figures. He was a little surprised as well. To be able to mobilize such a large force, they should not be ordinary people. He instantly thought of the 3 clans he had seen at the auction: 7 Luminaries Manor, Black Moon Sect, and the yellow-robed old man from another clan that he had not heard of. Among these 3 clans, he felt that the possibility of the former 2 clans being involved was higher. However, he could not rule out the possibility that others had their eyes on the hilt of the Time Sand Sword. Even so, he still felt that the former 2 clans were more likely. On a huge rock, the 6 silhouettes were leaning against the huge rock wall. Their entire bodies were wrapped in black robes, and even their faces couldn't be seen clearly. Only a pair of bright eyes were emitting a gloomy, killing intent. Astonishing energy fluctuations were rippling from the bodies of these 6 people. That level was stronger than Dingmingyu's, but weaker than initial god experts. Surprisingly, they were demigod experts. Faced with Yin Nuoxing's soft shout, the 6 figures acted as if they didn't hear it. However, the killing intent in their eyes became even more intense. You're not going to say it? Then just keep your words to yourself. Yin Nuoxing blinked and sighed softly. He didn't panic. He could even face a demon emperor expert with composure, let alone 6 demigod experts. Kill! Suddenly, a cold shout came from one of the black figures. Then, the 6 figures rushed out together. They clenched their fists, and black flying knives appeared in their hands. Demonic aura surged. Then, the shadows of the knives swept out like a rain of knives, enveloping Yin Nuoxing and the other 3 from all directions. When Yin Nuoxing saw that the 6 people acted decisively, he sighed. He threw a wooden stick into the bonfire with his right hand. Then, he raised it gently and snapped his fingers. He also shouted softly, "Explode." The rising flame barrier suddenly exploded, transforming into a gigantic purple fire wave that surged towards the 6 people who did not even have time to stop. In an instant, they were engulfed. The flying daggers that covered the sky and covered the earth were completely incinerated by the extremely high temperature of the purple night dim flame, leaving not even ashes behind. In the purple sea of fire, a series of energy barriers rose up. However, the energy barriers that the 6 of them had just raised did not even last for 3 seconds before they collapsed under their astonished gazes. The blazing flames quickly engulfed their bodies, and a series of miserable cries rang out from the sea of fire. In this empty underground world, it was very horrifying, and Yin Nuoxing had goosebumps when he heard it. He rubbed his arms lightly and said in surprise, "So you guys are not mutes." After he finished speaking, he snapped his fingers again. The sea of fire that filled the sky suddenly shrank slightly and disappeared in a few breaths of time. Following the disappearance of the sea of fire, the 6 black-robed figures fell from it. However, the black robes that were wrapped around them were all burned. Their hands and feet were still wrapped in flame ropes, like 2 small snakes emitting blazing heat. Don't move. Otherwise, the slow rope will explode. You won't be able to keep your hands and feet. Yin Nuoxing's indifferent voice sounded, causing the 6 people who wanted to struggle to stiffen. They raised their heads with some difficulty. Under the black robes were 6 middle-aged faces. Their flesh and blood were badly burned by the purple night flame. Even though it was only for a while, it almost crippled them. Chapter 673. In the bright underground world, a ball of purple flames rose from Yin Nuoxing's palm. Her bright eyes were slightly cold as she looked at the 6 figures who were curled up like shrimps on the ground. There was an unconcealable chill in her eyes. Boom! The stone wall at the side suddenly exploded. Rocks were blasted to pieces and scattered all over the ground. An inconspicuous black shadow flashed out. It was just like a dagger in the pitch-black night that wanted to take one's life. It swiftly charged toward Yu, who was seated beside the bonfire. A monstrous murderous intent surged out. Yu was shocked when the stone fragments exploded. When Mei Mao turned around, she saw the pitch-black dagger charging towards her. It was less than a foot away from her. The murderous intent was like 1,000 years of ice that licked her delicate face, making her smell the scent of death. Yu did not even have time to react to this lightning-fast attack. The demonic aura in her body surged out uncontrollably. She hurriedly folded her arms in front of her and closed her eyes tightly, waiting for the moment of intense pain to come. However, the black dagger and the figure that had charged out from the stone were now firmly pinned in the air. The figure in the black robe also widened his eyes in shock. At this distance, he only needed to move forward a little more to slay Yu. However, no matter how much power he channeled, he could not move an inch. It was as if he had turned into a statue and could not move at all. An assassination attempt against Yu. Yin Nuoxing gently turned her head. A golden array slowly appeared on the ground. It was the suppression array. When she had sat down, this array was constructed to guard against situations like this. You knew about it long ago. The black figure holding the dagger said in shock. The figure that was frozen in the air trembled continuously. His widened eyes were filled with disbelief. Yu nervously opened her arms to let go of Mei Mao. When she saw this scene, she quietly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she jumped up from the ground like a bird startled by the twang of a bough and threw herself into Yin Nuoxing's arms in panic. Her delicate body trembled slightly. Scared? Don't worry, I am here. Yin Nuoxing opened his arms and received Yu in his embrace. He comforted her in a gentle voice. His hand also gently stroked her small head and pressed her face against his chest. After which, he lifted his head and looked at the black shadow sculpture that was frozen in space. He faintly said, I'm just being paranoid. Or do you think that you can hide from me with this shoddy stocking? By the way, my soul force can fuse into the void. I've experienced assassination once, and I'm already afraid of it. Therefore, after coming out of the pavilion, my soul force has been spreading throughout the void. Where do you think you're hiding? Yin Nuoxing laughed self-deprecatingly. He was referring to the time outside the Xian family in Star Universe City. Then, his voice gradually turned cold. 7 people. 6 demigods will attack from the front, and 1 divine sun expert will be responsible for the assassination. 2 attacks. Tell me where you are from, and what is your objective? If your answer satisfies me, I can even let you die a quick death. Yin Nuoxing clenched his fists, and a cracking sound could be heard. He coldly smiled and said, Although my hands are very gentle, I can also do very cruel things. I advise you to tell me honestly. The 6 people that were bound by the fire rope groaned in pain. They felt that the fire rope that bound their limbs had become much hotter. The body of the black figure that was frozen was also trembling slightly. His eyes that were originally filled with baleful aura were now filled with shock and fear. He was an initial divine realm expert, but he was frozen in place just like that. The energy in his body couldn't move at all. The things that happened today had shocked him to the extreme. Who exactly are you? You are definitely not a student ranked fourth on the demonic ranking of the Long Guang Academy. The frozen black figure shouted with a trembling voice. Yin Nuoxing's eyebrows twitched. He was also somewhat astonished. He coldly stared at the person in front of him and coldly said, "From your words, it seems that you know quite a bit about our Long Guang Academy. Could it be that you are a spy among the students? Or are you from some force in Sunglow City? Although this kind of information is very easy to find, you guys appeared today. It seems that the Seven Luminaries Palace and the Black Moon Sect can also do this?" The frozen black figure was startled. This guy's guess, damn it. I estimated the target's strength wrongly. This guy isn't a demonic ranking. He's a monster. The frozen black figure struggled with all his might, wanting to break free. However, Yin Nuoxing waved his hand, and the figure fell in front of him. He was like a dead fish, unable to move. A purplish-black greatsword appeared in Yin Nuoxing's hand. He calmly stared at the person and said, "It seems like you guys don't plan to speak." After saying that, he sighed. He stretched out his left hand and lightly snapped his fingers. A strange energy fluctuation quietly spread out. The six of them were shocked to discover that the fire ropes binding their limbs had suddenly become several times hotter. Moreover, there was an extremely terrifying energy condensing within them. Boom! The intense flame explosion caused the spacious underground world to shake a few times. The huge rocks by the side shook until they collapsed. Numerous huge cracks appeared on the ground, as though there was an earthquake. The solidified black figure turned its gaze in shock and looked at the spot where the flame had exploded behind Yin Nuoxing. Pafta, all of a sudden, a blurry object landed in front of him, causing the deity's shadow to freeze for a moment. When he took a closer look, his heart trembled violently. That blurry object was a charred, broken palm. The broken part was as smooth as a mirror, and the entire hand had been burnt to the point where the skin and flesh were exposed. He could not help but swallow his saliva. Close your eyes. You're not allowed to look." Yin Nuoxing hugged Yu tightly and pressed her cheeks against his chest. He then whispered to Little Moon, who was beside him. The two little girls hurriedly nodded and closed their Mei-Mao's eyes. They had always obeyed Yin Nuoxing's words unconditionally. The black figure trembled as he turned his gaze behind Yin Nuoxing. Huge cracks had appeared at the place where the explosion occurred. On the charred floor, he could see pieces of broken corpses, severed limbs, and half of a head. White brain matter had flowed all over the ground, as well as some charred internal organs. I rarely kill people because it would dirty my hands. However, I can be very cruel when I kill people, especially when I'm in a bad mood. I'll be even more cruel when I see the broken corpses and internal organs. The happier I am, the crueler I will be. For example, the scene behind me. I don't think you want to be one of them. Yin Nuoxing's face was dark and ferocious. That cruel smile made the powerful son of God tremble. You want to pry information out of me? Dream on. The black figure's body trembled, but his eyes were extremely sinister. He grinned and said, "Don't be so smug. None of you can escape. None of you can escape." Yin Nuoxing's eyes were cold. The netherworld ruins, sword in her hand, slashed down and pierced through his stomach. Then she spun it around and smashed his internal organs into pieces. At the same time, she said coldly, "Girl, close your eyes too." Ziyin was shocked when she heard this, and her jade-like hands hurriedly covered her beautiful eyes. The darkness had just assaulted her when she heard a wave of shocking, painful roars. There was also a wave of the sound of a long sword entering and leaving flesh, and the sound of bones shattering. Those numerous sounds caused her delicate body to tremble slightly. Seeing that he was unwilling to say a word even in such a state, Yin Nuoxing frowned and sighed softly. She snapped her fingers and the purple night flames erupted, swallowing the black figure and the scene behind him. Since she knew that he wouldn't reveal any information, there was no point in keeping him alive. Ziyin gently opened Mei-Mao when she heard the sound of burning flames. She saw Yin Nuoxing looking indifferently at the flying flames. Her heart tightened when she thought of what he had just said. Seeing her look over, Yin Nuoxing also turned his gaze and gently put down Yuer, who was tightly hugging him. After which, he also sat down and smiled at the three women. He said, "Are you afraid? Me?" Those words weren't a joke. Sometimes I have such impulses. For example, when I see Chi Hao Yu or Chi Yu, I have such impulses. Yin Nuoxing hugged her knees and said calmly. She looked at the purple bonfire in front of her with a dazed expression. That was his dark side. Ever since he had fallen to the dark side for the first time in the spiritual light tower, his murderous thoughts had become even stronger. Although he had defended his mind and suppressed his demonic nature in the end, he could feel that his temperament had become slightly darker. Xian and Mei Mao were in a daze for a while, then sighed softly and nodded. This made Yin Nuoxing laugh at himself even more. Before he could say anything, he saw Xian suddenly move to his side. Then, a pair of soft red lips came close and pressed against his lips, making him slightly stunned. Don't think too much. No matter what little star has become, she will always be the little fool I love. Their lips touched for a while and then separated. Xian's sleep-talking whispers entered Yin Nuoxing's ears, causing her heart to beat slightly faster. A moment later, she smiled gently and nodded. Yuer and Little Moon also came over from the side, sticking to Yin Nuoxing and laughing nonstop. They seemed to have forgotten what had just happened, causing the inexplicable emotions in his heart to slowly calm down. Shwa! A few minutes later, the sound of wind breaking suddenly came from the distance. Yin Nuoxing and the others also turned their gazes vigilantly, but soon they relaxed because they all saw Lin Sheng's figure. Brother Yin, Lin Sheng, Ding Mengyu, and the others landed in front of the open space. At a glance, they saw the charred ground and the broken traces. They were stunned and hurriedly ran over. Are you okay? Ding Mengyu asked softly. Yin Nuoxing smiled and waved her hand. Before we entered the cave, we were intercepted by 2 demigod-level powerhouses. Although it was a little troublesome, it wasn't a big problem. Brother Yin, what happened to your side? Lin Sheng also saw the charred ground and asked doubtfully. 2. What do they look like? Yin Nuoxing asked. Their entire bodies were wrapped in black robes. I don't know what they looked like under the black robes, but they seemed to be a little familiar with our Far Light Academy and knew some information. Hearing this, Lin Sheng shook his head in distress. Looks like it's the same group of people. Yin Nuoxing also scratched her head in confusion and sighed in confusion. Ding Mengyu stared at the 2 charred areas of the ground, her willowy eyebrows trembling slightly. Then, she looked at Yin Nuoxing in shock and said, That son of God expert and 6 demigod experts were all killed by you? Those 2 said there were 7 experts. They're all dead. Yin Nuoxing nodded calmly, as if the matter of killing those experts had nothing to do with him. He looked around and said, Looks like the person who sent out the experts is very clear about the Far Light Academy. Otherwise, he wouldn't know that I'm also a student there. Ding Mengyu and the others nodded. If they were to talk about when other forces were involved, it would definitely be at the auction. However, they and Yin Nuoxing had acted separately, but at the same time they were both involved. This made her feel that the possibility of it being the Xianin sect was very high. Mei Mao thought for a moment. Ding Mengyu smiled faintly and said, Looks like it was the right choice to ask you to come with us this time. You killed a son of God expert just like that, this? Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and shook her head. She didn't say anything. Could it be that telling them to kill a low-level god was enough? A matter of snapping a few fingers. Chapter 674. In the depths of the maze, in the safe area of the 9th floor, a young man in white stood on a hill. At this time, his face was extremely gloomy. Beside him stood a middle-aged man, who also looked surprised and doubtful. All idiots, all good-for-nothings. 2 demigod-level experts couldn't deal with 4 demigod-level experts and 1 demigod-level expert. That was fine, but 6 demigod-level experts and 1 son of God couldn't even deal with those 4 demigod-level experts. A group of demigod-level experts lost to a group of inexperienced students. There were pieces of broken soul tablets at the feet of the young man in white. Obviously, the news of the assassins' deaths had been made known to them. Beside the young man in white, the middle-aged man in green also frowned and said, "Did the people of Golden Palace do it? They warned us yesterday." After the auction, there were often robberies on the way, but the Golden Palace had protective measures in this regard. There was a transmitting formation in the Golden Palace that could directly send people away. If a distinguished guest was killed, once the culprit was found out, he would be blacklisted by the Golden Palace. Then, the culprit would be hunted down until there was no door to heaven and no road to hell. Golden Palace belongs to Golden Palace. They have simple protective measures for the distinguished guests who complete the auction. Yesterday was just a warning. Who would know that we would kill them in the underground maze? In such a chaotic place, they can't find us. That's why we sent people to kill them, isn't it? The young man in white clenched his teeth. No matter how hard he racked his brains, he could not figure out how the people from Yun-Nuo planet had managed to kill a few demigod-level and divine-level powerhouses. The white-clothed young man's feet violently stomped on the shattered soul tablet on the ground. He grabbed his head in a ferocious manner. A moment later, the expression on his face suddenly disappeared, after which he let out a long sigh and coldly said, "Old Hun, let's continue moving forward. Let's not bother about those clowns for now." The maze's owner's biggest secret is hidden in the depths of the maze. As long as we know it. So what if it's Golden Palace? I'll pull down those high and mighty existences on the altar. There was no distinction between day and night in the underground world. Numerous people were flashing by under the sparkling light. All of them were moving towards the deepest level of the maze. The deepest part of the maze hid the lifelong secrets of the maze owner. As the overwhelming flow of people passed by, the silent labyrinth seemed to have come to life slowly. Below the 9th floor, the magical arrays slowly recovered, and the elemental creatures that had been condensed gradually came to life. But in the face of the endless army, these things that had yet to fully recover obviously couldn't stop the group of greedy adventurers. Countless arrays and elemental creatures in the underground world were smashed to pieces by the energy. It could be said that no one had ever been so successful in exploring a maze before. This scene appeared in the entire underground world, making everyone's blood boil. Swish! In a forest on the 10th floor, Yin Nuoxing, Ding Mingyu, and the others rushed out. Their movements were quite slow, following behind a large group of people. Those who were extremely powerful might have already reached the 45th floor. As soon as they entered the 10th floor, Yin Nuoxing and the others were stunned because the 10th floor was different from the previous ones. It was no longer a simple underground world. Although it was still underground, it was very bright. Large pieces of crystals were inlaid on the 1,000-feet-high stone walls, making it as bright as day. There were also original lakes, forests, hills, and basins. The area was also much larger. Without the complex passages that extended in all directions, it was just like a small world. After the 5th floor, there were some arrays operating slowly, but they were operating very slowly and didn't pose any threat to them. Even the 10th floor was the same. On this floor, demigod rank powerhouses could be seen everywhere. There were also a lot of demigod rank powerhouses and demonic rank powerhouses. The number of people attracted to this maze was obvious. It's almost time to enter the 11th floor. Let's hurry up. The maze seems to be recovering on its own. Ding Mingyu looked around. She felt that after entering the 10th floor, the maze showed signs of coming to life. It's almost time. I can feel that the magical arrays in this maze are recovering. The magical arrays have been operating since the 5th floor, but the operating efficiency is less than 1% of the original. Now that we're on the 10th floor, it's almost 40%. I'm thinking that the deeper we go, the faster the magical arrays will recover. Yin Nuoxing muttered to herself. Hearing this, Ding Mingyu and the others' expressions turned serious. If that was the case, wouldn't the magical arrays have completely recovered by the time they entered the 16th floor? Then we have to speed up. Ding Mingyu waved her hand gently. Then, the speed of the 10 of them instantly increased. They turned into a string of light and swept past the forest on the 10th floor. Yin Nuoxing suddenly froze. His eyes flickered slightly. Then he suddenly threw out a bunch of chains and tied Ding Mingyu and the others up. He hurriedly reminded them, "Be careful." Ding Mingyu and the others were startled. Before they could react, the chains wrapped around them suddenly pulled them back. Then a huge pillar of flames suddenly erupted from the forest in front of them. The pillar of flames was green in color. The extremely high temperature set the nearby forest ablaze. The space was slightly distorted because of the high temperature. If they had rushed in just now, not many of them would have survived. There's a volcano below. Yin Nuoxing looked down. There was a huge volcano in the dense forest. However, what surprised him was that the volcano didn't erupt naturally. It was triggered by a magical array. There's something. Mei Mao glanced at the volcano. There was a huge magical array in the magma below the volcano. At the top of the volcano's crater, there was a dark red ball. However, upon closer inspection, it wasn't a ball, but a round, dark red fruit. There was also a stalk of yellow grass on the rock wall. The ball was hanging from the stalk of the grass. Spiritual flame, fruit? Seeing this, Lin Xing also turned his gaze. He saw that the round, dark red ball was also extending and flickering slightly. The dark red ball, swaying at the crater of the volcano, has absorbed an endless amount of fire elemental energy. It's indeed a spiritual flame fruit. If a fire elemental controller eats it, the fire elemental energy will be filled with spiritual energy and increase its power. Yin Nuoxing also looked at the crater below. Then he smiled and said, "Why, do you want to go and get it?" However, the magical array below will probably erupt once every 3 minutes. If he gets sucked in, even a beginner god will be roasted. When they heard these half-serious and half-threatening words, Lin Xing and the rest broke out in cold sweat. Yin Nuoxing chuckled. His figure flashed as he descended towards the mouth of the volcano. After taking a glance at the volcano, he jumped in. Although the temperature here was high, it did not affect him at all. In a few breaths' time, he had landed 10 meters above the magma. When he saw the spirit flame fruit hanging on the rock wall, he chuckled and reached out to pluck it. Buzz! However, just as he plucked the spiritual flame fruit, a soft buzzing sound suddenly came from the volcano. Then, the 100-feet wide crater of the volcano was suddenly covered by a transparent energy barrier. Careful! This sudden change caused Ding Mingyu to freeze for a moment. Her delicate body flashed, and she dived towards the mouth of the volcano. With a wave of her jade-like hand, 1,000 feet large energy light beam shot out and collided with the transparent energy film, after which it was shaken until it scattered. What? Lin Xing and the rest were also stunned. Soon after, they immediately entered battle mode. Their eyes were slightly cold as they looked at the forest below. They could see figures flashing over from the forest within the volcano. There were actually around 30 people. They swiftly rushed out from the forest and landed at the mouth of the volcano. This group of people were holding blades and swords in their hands. Their eyes were filled with ridicule, and from the fierce aura between their brows, one could tell that they weren't kind people. Perhaps they had walked on the tip of the blade for many years. At the head of the group was a man in his 30s or 40s. His eyes were filled with a savage and cunning glint. What's that saying again? The 30-over people swept their gazes over Ding Mingyu, Xian, Jun Luo, Yi, and the other girls. The leader chuckled and said, "This is a blatant robbery. If you don't want that little beauty below to be burned to a crisp, obediently hand over your valuables, it will be beneficial to all of us." Chuan Mu and Lin Kuei stared at this group of people in an unfriendly manner. Lin Xing also turned his gaze and frowned slightly. This group was not weak. The leader was a demigod-level expert, while the rest were at the 7th or 8th devil level. 2 of them were even at the peak of the devil level. It would be rather troublesome for them to deal with such a lineup. Without mentioning the fact that one of them was trapped below, there were also 2 burdens here. I'm afraid that you guys have used this method many times. Because you don't dare to go down to pluck the spiritual flame fruit. You guys have surrounded the crater of the volcano and forced the companions of those who go down to pluck the fruit to hand over their valuables. Only then will the barrier be opened. Lin Sheng glanced at them. He crossed his arms and said in an indifferent voice, "What a good plan. But didn't anyone tell you that you should pick the soft persimmons?" Lin Sheng's eyes turned cold. He could not be bothered to waste his breath on them. He stomped his foot on the ground, and in the void, a huge azure formation slowly appeared. It quickly took shape, and waves of terrifying lightning energy wreaked havoc in the formation. The formation, which was 100 feet in size, enveloped the sky above the crater of the volcano and enveloped the two groups of people. Either you open the barrier, or you guys could try the power of this 10,000 thunder prism. When Chuan Mu and the rest saw the formation that contained rolling lightning energy, their cheeks trembled slightly. A few days ago, Lin Sheng had used this formation to fight with Bai Yuya. In the end, both sides had suffered great losses. After not seeing him for a few days, his control of this formation had become even more exquisite. Lin Sheng's eyes turned cold. He had secretly prepared this formation when this group of people came out. It contained the true lightning energy of heaven and earth. Back when he was cultivating, Yin Nuoxing had even brought him into the thunderclouds to strike for half a day. "Brat, how dare you?" The middle-aged man, who was the leader, also felt the terrifying power of this formation. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked coldly at Lin Sheng. He sneered and said, "Then let's try it. Unless we open this barrier ourselves, even a godchild can't destroy it. Let's also try to see if we can last longer in the formation, or if that little girl will turn into ashes first." He could naturally see the strength of Ding Mingyu and the rest. They were just a group of demon rank boys and girls. Even if the formation was powerful, it could only hold them back for a while. If they really wanted to fight, he did not think that this group of delicate guys would be able to do anything. "What are you guys playing at?" Mu Chen's eyes turned completely cold. Just as he was about to take action, a puzzled voice came from behind. Everyone was stunned, and they quickly turned their heads. They saw that on the light screen at the crater of the volcano, there was an additional girl with colorful hair. She was staring at the large group of people with her bright eyes, and there was doubt and curiosity in her eyes. Ding Mingyu and the rest were stunned. The middle-aged man, who was the leader of the group, was also stunned. Immediately, a trace of ferocity surged into his eyes. "Let's go. I found a shortcut." Yin Nuoxing did not even look at the group of uninvited guests. She waved her hand and threw out a few chains, which wrapped around Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, Zian, and the rest. She then smiled, and under their stunned gazes, pulled them through the light screen at the crater of the volcano, and jumped into the volcano. When the group saw that Yin Nuoxing and the rest had jumped in, their eyes widened in shock. For a moment, they forgot how the girl had passed through the barrier, and they hurriedly ran to the crater of the volcano. Boom! However, before they could look down, a huge green pillar of fire suddenly shot up into the sky. Those who were close to it were directly burned by the high temperature. They didn't even have the chance to scream before they were turned into ashes. Seeing this, the leader's gaze hardened. With a wave of his large hand, he pulled back those people who did not have the time to stop. However, among those people who were pulled back, there was still a portion of them who were infected by the green flames. They stuck to their clothes like maggots, causing them to be so shocked that they hurriedly rolled on the ground. After a moment, when the fire pillar disappeared, the leader frowned and walked to the crater of the volcano. When he looked down, he could no longer see the shadows of Yin Nuoxing and the rest. Immediately, a trace of gloominess flashed across his eyes, and he said in a low voice, "We will not let this matter rest." He didn't think that those guys would be suicidal. Go to the lower levels." As his words faded, that person waved his large hand and led the remaining murderous-looking troops away from the volcano and hurriedly headed into the distance. After losing the spirit flame fruit, there was no longer any value in camping here. Moreover, they had even lost some men this time. It was truly a case of trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. Chapter 675. At that moment, Yin Nuoxing, who was in the magma, naturally did not know what had happened above. If she knew, She might have directly activated the magical formation in the volcano and bombarded the group of people indiscriminately to save herself some trouble. After being dragged into the volcano, Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the others really wanted to ask her if she was crazy. It was only when they saw that the group of people had safely passed through the huge magical formation and entered the magma that they stared blankly at the figure in front of them. However, as soon as they entered the magma, the magical formation behind them suddenly exploded. The earth-shattering energy caused the magma to boil, causing Lin Sheng and the others to jump in fright. Then, they looked at Yin Nuoxing in confusion. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? I took control of the magical formation for a short period of time and delayed its explosion by 1 minute. Just as we arrived, the time was up. Sensing the many doubtful gazes behind her, Yin Nuoxing knew what they wanted to ask and chuckled softly. Ding Mingyu and the others had strange expressions when they heard how relaxed she sounded. It seemed that they knew too little about this junior. Every time they sensed that he was extraordinary, it was only the tip of the iceberg or even a small part of that tip. This person was like an ice field that was immersed in the eternal ice sea. They could not see his full appearance. Where are we going now? Ding Mingyu shook her head lightly and shook off those thoughts. Her delicate body moved lightly, and she walked side by side with Yin Nuoxing. Mei Mao looked at the red magma world and asked, "The level below? I just saw that the flow of fire elements at the bottom of the magma is a little strange. It is flowing down like a funnel. There should be an exit below. If I'm not wrong, we should be able to go to the next few levels." Yin Nuoxing pointed below and smiled. "It would be best if we can go directly to the 16th level." Hearing this, Ding Mingyu nodded gently and did not say anything else. She followed closely at the side. As the group ventured deeper, the red magma world slowly turned green. The temperature here was also frighteningly high. Huge pieces of solidified magma rocks were suspended in the viscous magma. They contained an extremely large amount of fire elemental energy. Lin Sheng even carefully collected 1 or 2 pieces. When he was collecting them, he was almost scalded by the temperature of the magma rocks. Be careful. The temperature here is not a joke. Looking at Lin Sheng, who was waving his hand, Yin Nuoxing said faintly. Then, with a thought, the purple fire circle outside the magma expanded. He was also worried that someone would accidentally pass through the circle of fire and be swallowed by the sticky green magma. They shuttled through the magma. With the protection of the purple fire circle, they did not encounter any obstacles. However, as they went deeper and deeper, they saw the color of the magma change from green to light purple, to blue, and finally to yellow. After passing through each magma region, they could only feel that the temperature of the magma was getting more and more terrifying. In the end, they even felt that low-level gods would be burned alive in the yellow magma. Approximately 4 hours later, a drop of sweat appeared on Yin Nuoxing's forehead. It was merely a drop, but it caused Ziyan's heart to be slightly alarmed. Her pretty eyes anxiously looked at her surroundings, and she carefully released her spiritual strength. Just as it passed through the purple fire circle, she felt an extremely hot feeling being transmitted back, causing her heart to be alarmed. She hurriedly cut off the connection with that wisp of spiritual strength. At this moment, the magma had already turned black. The black magma made everyone a little anxious, but they were still relatively calm. However, when they inadvertently looked at Yin Nuoxing, they were stunned. They saw that the latter was frowning. At the same time, they were startled, but at the same time, they also felt a little uneasy. They had never seen the latter with such an expression. He had always been calm and composed. "Brother Yun," Lin Sheng could not help but call out, making Yin Nuoxing turn his head. When he saw the worried faces of Lin Sheng, Ding Mingyu, and the others, Yin Nuoxing smiled and shook his head. He said, "I'm fine. I just feel a little familiar, but a little unfamiliar. Maybe it's just an illusion. Hold on a little longer. We should be able to get out in another hour. I'll increase my speed. Hold on tight to the chains. Don't fall behind." Yin Nuoxing smiled and waved his hand. Then his body moved. Faint golden particles swept out of the fire circle. They were very dazzling in the black magma. After an hour, everyone felt that something was wrong. The magma around them seemed to flow much faster. It was as if there was a gap in the magma world, and a large amount of magma was escaping from it. Sensing this abnormality, Lin Sheng and the rest were slightly delighted. There was no need for them to say anything. Yin Nuoxing raised his speed to the maximum and quickly passed through the sea of magma. Then, at an unknown depth below, he saw a spot of light. It was a gap that was 100 feet wide. Endless black magma was flowing out from there. When the latter saw this, his body moved and pulled everyone out of the gap at an extremely fast speed. Puffed! In a cave that flickered with a faint light, thick black magma that was 1,000 feet tall flowed out from the top. It piled up into a huge magma lake that was 10,000 feet wide at the bottom of the cave. At this moment, a cluster of lava suddenly exploded from within the lava waterfall. A cluster of dense pale purple flames shot out from within and swiftly rushed to the shore. A moment later, the flames slowly dissipated, revealing 10 figures within. They involuntarily smacked their lips as they looked at the slightly glowing cave entrance in front of them and a lava waterfall that stretched across the sky behind them. I wonder what level this is. Yin Nuoxing gave a long yawn, stretched, and said lazily, "We have walked down vertically in the magma sea for 4.5 hours. This should be at least the 15th or 16th level," Ding Mingyu said hesitantly. "I have never been to such a deep level. In the past, when I was on a mission, I went to the 8th or 9th level at most. I feel that the mission this time is a little harsh. Let's go out and take a look first." Lin Sheng smiled and waved his hand. Yin Nuoxing and the others nodded. Then they walked out of the cave in front of them closely. After walking out of the cave, they saw that the outside was shrouded in clouds and mist. A tall mountain stood before them like a giant pillar that supported the sky. The bright light made one suspect that this was not the underground world, but the outside world. Yin Nuoxing and the others were stunned as they looked at the bright mountain range. They looked at each other. Then they jumped up and landed on the mountain peak, after which they saw that the mountains were filled with people. Even further away, there were countless people rushing out from the 100,000 feet tall cave at the edge of the world. That lineup was extremely spectacular. There are actually so many people here. I did not expect that we would not be able to surpass them by much even after taking a shortcut. Chuan Mu could not help but smack his lips. From the looks of it, there were probably hundreds of thousands of people. Moreover, the auras of those who flew past were unusually powerful, causing them to feel uncomfortable all over. The spiritual strength merged into the void like water ripples. Then, it was carried by the light elements and rapidly spread out. Soon, Yin Nuoxing heard the information she wanted to hear from the feedback of the spiritual strength. Then, her face trembled violently. "What's wrong?" Seeing her reaction, Lin Sheng and the others were also a little stunned and quickly asked. "This is the 18th level. Some people have already barged in since the maze became silent the day before yesterday. They have only arrived here now. However, it seems that they have not reached the end yet." Yin Nuoxing laughed dryly and shook her head. Hearing this, Ding Mingyu and the others also knew why his expression was so strange just now. They didn't expect that when they jumped from the magma, they were already at the 18th level. In just 5 hours, they had directly passed through the 8th level, which made them a little speechless. Yin Nuoxing turned her gaze to Ding Mingyu and asked softly, "Let's be careful. Among this group of people, there are many beginner-level gods. On the contrary, there are very few demon-level experts. I reckon that those who came in with us might still be advancing on the upper levels. Should we follow them to the 19th level, or—" Ding Mingyu hesitated for a moment when she heard this. She looked at the many human figures that flashed past in front of her and thought for a moment. Then, she sighed softly and spoke in a faint voice. "Actually, our mission has already been completed at this point. However, we should still follow them and take a look. I'm also very curious as to where the end of this maze is. Just what exactly is hidden there that caused so many experts to rush over like a flock of ducks?" Yin Nuoxing smiled and nodded. His palm touched the ring without leaving a trace. Even if they did not go, he had to go. The body of the Sword of Time might be at the bottom. After making up their minds, everyone sat down and rested for a while. Yin Nuoxing even gave everyone an elixir. It was said that it could conceal one's aura. Lin Sheng and the others did not suspect anything and swallowed it in one bite. Then, they were shocked to discover that if they were to detect the aura now, they would think that this was a group of godly emperor experts. I have not eaten it either. Just as everyone was about to ask what the elixir was, Yin Nuoxing said something that made everyone speechless. After recuperating for a moment, Yin Nuoxing and the rest headed towards the huge human flow. Just as they entered the human flow, a noisy noise followed. Everyone glanced at this group of people. When they saw the faces of Ding Mingyu and the other girls, they were slightly stunned. However, when they sensed the aura of this group of people, their expressions turned solemn. Soon after, those gazes hurriedly swept past them. Seeing this, Ding Mingyu and the others were a little surprised. These people were all beginner god-level experts, but they could clearly see the fear in their eyes. They could not help but snicker in their hearts. Who would have thought that this group of young men and women who looked like godly emperors on the surface were actually a group of demon and immortal level experts? As they hurried along, Yin Nuoxing pinched his nose and made use of the advantage of his face. Under the strange looks of Xian and the others, he talked and laughed. He even spent a little money to buy a map. The map showed the maze from the 15th to the 18th level, and there were many markings. Therefore, their mission was easily completed. Well, this mission is completely completed. Ding Mingyu received the map and could not help smiling bitterly. Chuan Mu and the others also nodded. They already had the map as proof, and it was a map from the 15th level onwards. Now, they could safely return home and reap more than 10 million energy points. However, they had already said that they would go down and take a look. Then, they would go deeper to take a look. In a large group, Yin Nuoxing and the others saw a group of familiar figures. They could not help but turn their eyes. There were dozens of figures in similar clothes there. It's the group of people from the Xianin sect. Yin Nuoxing looked at the front. Among the group of people, the white-clothed young man he had seen at the auction was among them. The middle-aged man beside him was still flying with his arms crossed. The dozens of figures behind him were all dressed in white robes. The white robes were embroidered with some sinister ghosts and monsters. They looked very terrifying. Yin Nuoxing swept his gaze across the dozens of figures and frowned slightly. These people were not weak. The weakest ones were at the 7th or 8th seal of the devil rank, while the strongest ones were shockingly a few son of God experts. That sinister energy fluctuation gathered together, causing the surrounding people to fearfully make way for a large area. The 7 Luminaries Palace and the Yellow-Robed Man are also here. Yin Nuoxing looked at another area and immediately discovered Qi Yao and the Yellow-Robed Old Man. Clearly, the 3 of them had also found a shortcut that allowed them to reach the 18th level so quickly. The 3 groups of people were very far away from them and were very far ahead. Therefore, they did not discover them. Ding Mingyu and the others also took a glance, then gradually retracted their gazes and looked at the huge black hole in front of them. It was the entrance to the next level. At this moment, there was a crowd of people swarming in like a swarm of ants. Yin Nuoxing frowned slightly as he looked at the black hole. He felt that something was not right. After the probing spiritual power entered the hole, there was no sign of it. It was as if it was a black hole that swallowed everything. Bang! An extremely abrupt sound suddenly came from his soul, causing his pupils to shrink slightly. His hand could not help but clench his chest. This feeling is coming again. Yin Nuoxing muttered in her heart. She then called out softly, Z. I don't know. Don't ask me. Go in and take a look. Z could not help but roll her eyes when she heard Yin Nuoxing's voice. She had even knocked over her teacup because of the tremor in her soul just now. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and nodded. He pulled Xian and the 2 girls to his side, then nodded at Ding Mingyu and the others and plunged into the huge black hole. Chapter 676. Within the pitch-black void, One couldn't even see their own fingers if they stretched out their hands. It was as though they were in a whirlpool. Streams of pressure pushed against their bodies. Yin Nuoxing hugged the three people in his arms tightly as astral energy gushed out, enveloping his entire body. In the midst of the chaos, he also felt a few small hands tightly hugging his body, causing him to involuntarily let out a laugh. The strange, squeezing force kept pushing Yin Nuoxing and the others, causing them to spin in a large circle. It was as if they were being pushed into the center of a whirlpool. If not for the fact that he didn't feel any danger, he probably would have taken out the netherworld ruins long ago. However, this kind of spinning motion made him a little dizzy. Just as he was about to struggle free, the force on his body suddenly disappeared. Soon after, the bodies of the four people were thrown out of the hole like garbage. A ray of light shone on his eyelids, causing Yin Nuoxing to furrow his eyebrows. He hurriedly stabilized his body and slowly opened his eyes, taking in a deep breath of cool air. As Yin Nuoxing expected, they were teleported away. There were chaotic spatial fluctuations in the black hole. At that moment, they were at the top of a mountain. At that moment, there were flashes of light on the top of the mountain, and silhouettes appeared one after another. Looking around, Yin Nuoxing frowned. He didn't see Ding Mingyu and the others here. Obviously, they had been separated in the hole. Xian and Little Moon were tightly hugged by him, so they hadn't been separated. Sky. Yin Nuoxing raised his head, and a flash of astonishment quickly surged into his eyes. Then, he couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. The 19th level was clearly underground, but there was a sky. It was obvious that this was a self-contained world. The person who had such means, the person who had left the maze, was obviously a high-level god, and at the same time, a great master of magic arrays. Yin Nuoxing was slightly stunned, but she wasn't too worried about Lin Sheng and the others. Because of the medicinal effect, they looked like a group of divine emperors. No one would be so bored as to provoke them. Moreover, Lin Sheng wasn't a simple person. As long as they didn't encounter any special trouble, they should be safe. As for themselves, there was no danger at all. Xian and the other two also slowly extricated themselves from his arms. Then, they looked at the self-created world with the sky and couldn't help but gasp in amazement. Xian Mei Mao looked around the world and was stunned for a moment. She tugged at Yin Nuoxing's sleeve and pointed into the distance, causing Yin Nuoxing to look over as well. Where Xianxian's jade-like finger was pointing, there was an extremely huge square crystal. It was far away on the horizon, and it was at least several 100,000 feet tall. It was like a giant pillar that held up the sky. Under the illumination of the sun, it flashed with extremely beautiful colors, and those colors seemed to be flowing within the crystal. Crystal Pillar. The Oracle Crystal Pillar. It's the Oracle Crystal Pillar mentioned on the 14th level. Rumor has it that if you comprehend the Tao under the Oracle Crystal Pillar, you can step into that legendary level. At this time, the surrounding people also noticed the crystal pillar that reached into the sky. Cries of surprise rang out one after another. These cries of surprise also alarmed those who had just appeared. Then, those people turned their gazes over in unison. Like a chain reaction, the cries of surprise suddenly became very loud. Countless cries of surprise rang in Yin Nuoxing's ears, causing her to feel a little dizzy. However, she still managed to capture some useful information. The Oracle Crystal Pillar? I didn't expect it to be here too. When you heard those voices, she also curled her cherry lips in surprise. Hearing those voices, Yin Nuoxing also lowered his head. He noticed the two words, also. Could it be that it was also in the demon world? Feeling a soft hand caressing her beautiful hair, Yi raised her head. The mischievous Mei Mao glanced at Yin Nuoxing and grinned. She transmitted her voice with a smile. Brother Yun, there's also a crystal pillar like this in the demon world. Even the name is the same. What Tao enlightenment can allow one to enter the demon god level? It's all a lie. Those demon emperor powerhouses have cultivated under the Oracle Crystal Pillar for years, thousands of years, and countless tens of thousands of years. In the end, they are still demon emperors. Hearing this, Xian also softly said, "In the end, it depends on one's luck. It's impossible for everyone to be able to endure that comprehension. This comprehension should be prepared for a special person." Yu nodded her little head, then smiled and said, "Brother Yin, why don't you give it a try? In history, there have been a few demon gods who have indeed attained enlightenment under the Oracle Crystal Pillar before stepping into the demon god level." Yin Nuoxing shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Forget about me. I don't have that kind of ambition. I can't even cross the demon realm." "Go. You won't lose a piece of meat even if you go." Pursed her lips and hugged his arm without any explanation, pulling him forward. When Little Moon saw this, she also pushed him from behind with a smile, causing Yin Nuoxing to smile even more bitterly. He nodded helplessly. When they saw him nodding, the two little girls laughed and high-fived, leaving him and Xian speechless. So it was the two of them who wanted to go. Yin Nuoxing sighed helplessly. He was being held hostage by the two little girls. He smiled helplessly at Xian, who also laughed coquettishly. Then, the four of them soared into the sky at the same time. As soon as the exclamation sounded, figures flew madly towards the huge crystal pillar. At this time, there were not many people left in the same place. This was a huge world. In the middle of it, there was a huge crystal pillar that was shining brightly. Countless figures were transported into this huge world. When Yin Nuoxing and the others moved, there were also countless figures in other parts of the world that rushed towards the huge central crystal pillar. However, there were some other figures who found other treasures at the place where they landed. They did not rush towards the crystal pillar immediately. Instead, they stayed behind to search for treasures. In a corner of this world, there was also a person who had the same idea. At this time, he was running desperately in the mountains. Behind him, there were a lot of angry roars. F***CK. I only took 1/10 of the elemental fragments. Do you have to chase after me like I'm your enemy? A figure rushed out of the forest in the mountain range. It was a handsome young man with a slightly thin figure. When he saw the energy storm behind him, cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He looked at the 10 thumb-sized red crystals in his hand and couldn't help but laugh foolishly. Then, his black eyes quickly surged with coldness, and his violent figure accelerated again. After passing through a mountain range, the young man heaved a sigh of relief. He raised his head and looked at the blue sky. He could not help but stop and gasp for breath. He looked at the huge crystal pillar in the distance and licked his lips. He could not help but laugh and say, "The Oracle Crystal Pillar? I wonder if Senior Ding and Brother Yin will also go there. If they go, then it will be easier to meet up with them." This person was naturally Lin Sheng. After appearing in this world, he had also judged the current situation. In the team, apart from Yu and the other two girls, he was the weakest. Even though he had the aura of a divine emperor to conceal everyone's probing, he still had to take care of himself first. Moreover, he had made a very interesting discovery. Not only could the pill disguise his aura as that of a divine emperor expert, it could also make one of his attributes reach the level of a divine emperor expert for a short period of time. For example, the strength of a divine emperor expert, the speed of a divine emperor expert, and the defense of a divine emperor expert. After resting for a while, he raised his head and scanned the mountain range. After looking for a while, just as Lin Sheng was about to rush out and head for the Oracle Crystal Pillar, there was a sudden uproar in the forest. Lin Sheng was slightly startled when he heard those exclamations. His figure flashed and left his original spot. Soon after, he appeared on a mountain peak. Following his line of sight, he saw a 1,000 feet tall square altar in the forest. A few drops of scarlet fresh blood were suspended on top of the altar. Boundless energy spread from the blood, causing him to be slightly startled. Essence blood? And it must be from a god. Could it be the essence blood of a high-ranking god? Looking at the few drops of blood, Lin Sheng's eyes narrowed slightly. The essence blood of a high-ranking god contained enormous power, almost to the point where it could be used as medicine. If ordinary practitioners or even low-ranking gods obtained it, it would be of great benefit to their cultivation. More importantly, condensing essence blood would cause great harm to one's vitality. Even a high-ranking god would not produce much essence blood without special circumstances. That would cause great harm to one's vitality. Lin Sheng did not expect that there would be nearly 20 drops of essence blood floating on the altar. The essence blood of an emperor god expert. When Lin Sheng recognized the drop of essence blood, the people in the forest also recognized it. They saw it more accurately than he did. Suddenly, there was a burst of exclamations. Then, countless people's eyes were filled with greed. They did not expect to see the oracle crystal pillar as soon as they entered the 19th level. Then, they saw the essence blood of an emperor god expert. Was this the 19th level where the owner of the maze stored his treasures? Lin Sheng looked at the greed in the eyes of the people in the forest, and his expression became serious. He was only a fake god king, but there were many real god experts in the forest. When he had snatched the fire element fragments, he had taken advantage of them. Those people did not want to return empty-handed, so they turned to snatch other things. That was why he had been lucky enough to snatch 10 out of the 100 fire element fragments. But now, wealth comes from danger. After a while, Lin Sheng's eyes flashed with passion. He could not let go of such a great opportunity. Just as he was about to rush out, there was a loud laugh in the forest. Then, a figure rushed out and went straight to the altar. Haha, if I get the essence blood of an emperor god expert, I will definitely break through to the divine king, divine underworld, and even the emperor of the underworld. The figure laughed and rushed toward the altar. When Lin Sheng saw this, his eyes narrowed slightly. After thinking for a while, he stood still and looked indifferently at the figure on the altar. That figure flashed and appeared on the altar, and then he roared with laughter as he stretched out his hand to grab the 20 drops of blood essence. However, right when he was about to grab the blood essence, an enormous black formation suddenly appeared on the altar. The formation appeared swiftly like a bolt of lightning, and then a strand of mysterious energy coiled around the figure. After that, the figure collapsed inch by inch and vanished under the horrified gazes of everyone. That figure didn't even let out a scream before it disappeared. Its body disintegrated inch by inch, as if it was being disintegrated. Lin Sheng and the others, who were about to snatch the essence blood, saw this cruel scene and their cheeks trembled wildly. This magic array was so terrifying. A divine king expert was gone just like that. That divine king expert was too careless. This is a forbidden magic array. Even if an emperor of the underworld entered, he would be disintegrated into thin air. People around them exclaimed as if they had recognized the function of this magic array. This made Lin Sheng's eyes twitch. Disintegrating life. This magic array was indeed forbidden. Do I have to give up? Lin Sheng was slightly regretful. This magic array was not something he could deal with. No matter how much he coveted the essence blood of an emperor god expert, he could not break the magic array that could disintegrate an emperor of the underworld expert. Looking at the treasure, but not being able to take it made him feel terrible. There were also many people around who were hesitating. In the end, they cursed angrily and rushed towards the oracle crystal pillar. Obviously, they had given up. No matter how good the treasure was, they had to be alive to enjoy it. Seeing that people were leaving, the people in the forest could not stand it and left as well. Lin Sheng saw that everyone had left and could not help but laugh bitterly. There was clearly a great opportunity here, but he could not take it. Just as Lin Sheng was about to leave, he suddenly realized that the black magic array had disappeared. He was stunned, but before he could do anything, a petite figure suddenly appeared at the bottom of the altar. Lin Sheng looked at the black magic array and was about to leave when he suddenly realized that the black magic array had disappeared. He was stunned, but before he could do anything, a petite figure suddenly appeared below the altar. That petite figure looked to be no more than 12 or 13 years old. She had a head of beautiful wine-red hair, with 4 tufts of black hair hanging down from her ears, reaching her knees. She wore a purple dress, and her snow-white shoulders were exposed in the air. Although her appearance was not very clear, her petite appearance was extremely cute. However, Lin Sheng did not find her cute at all. In the next moment, he saw the little girl jump onto the altar. With a wave of her small hand, she summoned the 20 drops of essence blood into her hand. Then, she put them away in a crystal-clear jade bottle. Seeing this scene, Lin Sheng did not need to think to know that the black magic array was this little girl's masterpiece. When he thought of this, he shuddered violently. Just as Lin Sheng's heart turned slightly cold due to the strange appearance of this little girl, the little girl on the altar suddenly turned her head. Her long eyelashes fluttered slightly as her wine-red eyes saw Lin Sheng, who was 1,000 feet away. Those burgundy eyes were very beautiful. However, the indifference in them made Lin Sheng's head explode. Chapter 677. The forest in the mountain range was like a sea of trees. In this sea of trees, towering trees covered an altar that was 1,000 feet tall. At the top of the altar stood a little girl with wine-red hair. Where her eyes stared at Lin Sheng, a wave of disgust surged from his heart. Without any hesitation, he turned around and tried to quickly leave this place. However, the moment he moved, the little girl with wine-red hair had already locked onto him. Her small feet took a light step forward. Buzz! Lin Sheng's body suddenly stiffened. A look of shock surged onto his face. He did not even dare to move because he saw that he was on the altar. The little girl with wine-red hair was already standing in front of him. Her wide sleeves covered both her hands. However, the slender hand hidden in her sleeves was already pressed against his heart. She kicked Lin Sheng from 1,000 feet away to the front of the altar. Then, she placed him on the stone platform of the altar as if he was a sacrificial offering. Lin Sheng did not dare to move at all. Even his breathing was suppressed. Cold sweat rolled down his forehead. He did not have the time to care about the cold sensation of lying on the stone platform. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that the little girl's delicate face was very cute. However, under the gaze of those wine-red eyes, he felt an incomparably strong aura of death. This was the first time he felt that death was so close to him. He did not doubt that the little hand on his heart could take his life in an instant. Even a real divine emperor would not be able to struggle, let alone a fake divine emperor. She was someone who could destroy the existence of a divine emperor. Furthermore, there was only a merciless coldness in those wine-red eyes. Lin Sheng looked over with some difficulty. At this moment, he could see clearly that her skin was extremely fair. Her little face was like 1,000 years of frost. However, there was no expression on her face. She looked exceptionally exquisite. Her petite figure was covered by a purple dress. If he had met her at any other time, he would have felt relaxed and happy. He would even have had the time to admire her. However, at this moment, his mind was spinning furiously. He wanted to find the slightest possibility that he could escape. The little girl looked at Lin Sheng quietly. After a long while, her long eyelashes suddenly twitched. Then, she lifted the little hand that was covering his heart and raised it into the air. Then, an extremely terrifying black energy rapidly condensed on her sleeve. The black energy that condensed made Lin Sheng feel the aura of death surging towards him like a tide. Am I done for? Upon seeing this, Lin Sheng's face abruptly turned deathly pale. He felt somewhat bitter in his heart. Previously, he had accidentally peeked at Yin Nua's star. At that time, the latter had already said that it was not a good habit. However, no one could be certain when it came to curiosity. He did not expect that he would actually fall for it this time around. Even if the Farlight Academy found out about such an expert, they would not be able to avenge him. Damn it, I don't want to die meaninglessly like this. What can I do? What can I do? I still have things that I must do. Qing Lian is still waiting for me. A ferocious look surged into his eyes. However, Lin Sheng was shocked to find that the space around him and all of his power had been sealed. He could not even sense his own power. It was as if he was just an ordinary person without any power at this moment. This little girl's power was frighteningly terrifying. Lin Sheng closed his eyes in despair as he watched the sleeve that was filled with a monstrous amount of death energy descend. There was no other way. Looks like this is the end of my life. I'm sorry, Qing Lian. I can't fulfill my promise to you. At the last moment, figures appeared in his mind. His father, his mother, Yi Qing Lian, and some of his brothers and sisters. The last scene was a colorful figure. As if he had caught onto an unrealistic hope, Lin Sheng flipped his wrist and took out the token that Yin Nuoxing had given him that was hidden in his sleeve. Just as he was about to use all his strength to crush it, he felt that the terrifying power that overflowed into the heavens suddenly dissipated. Furthermore, he heard a startled cry of surprise. This is a familiar aura. The instant the frightening power disappeared, Lin Sheng opened his eyes in astonishment. Soon after, he saw that the little girl with the wine-red eyes had some doubt on her exquisite face. However, from the looks of it, she had canceled her attack. This caused Lin Sheng to violently pant. Cold sweat soaked his clothes, causing them to stick to his body. The little girl looked Lin Sheng up and down in confusion. She then fixed her gaze on his palm. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Without any explanation, she took the colorful token from his hand and looked at it. She then raised it in front of him and said, "Where did you get this token?" Her voice was very pleasant to the ears. There was a hint of immaturity and maturity to it. These two feelings clashed with each other, and there was even a hint of magnetism to it. It was very pleasant to the ears. However, Lin Sheng did not have the time to care about this. He was currently gasping for breath. He had been too close to death, and his memories were replaying like a revolving lantern. He did not expect to inexplicably survive in the end. No matter what, he had to catch his breath first. As if sensing that his mind was about to collapse, the little girl did not rush him. She sat down cross-legged and looked at the colorful token in her hand with her wine-red eyes. Nostalgia and memories flashed across her eyes. After a long while, the little girl stood up when she heard the panting on the altar calm down. Her voice did not waver in the slightest as she asked again. Lin Sheng wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. His eyes were blurry as he looked at the colorful token. His voice was weak as he said, "That was given to me by my friend. There's a trace of his spiritual energy in it. He said that if I burn it, I can inform him." After speaking, Lin Sheng laughed bitterly. No matter how great and mysterious Yun Nuoxing's background was, he would not be able to deal with such a powerful person in such a short period of time. Furthermore, the little girl seemed to have sensed Yun Nuoxing's aura. He did not know if this was a good or bad thing, or if it would be better if she did not cause trouble for him. Thinking of this, Lin Sheng gritted his teeth fiercely and sat up abruptly. He snatched the token back without any explanation. Then he smashed it fiercely and lay down on the altar. He shouted sternly, "If you want to kill me, do whatever you want. I won't let you cause trouble for him." After speaking, he gritted his teeth tightly, as if waiting for the aura of death to come. "It seems that you really want to try dying a second time." Unexpectedly, there was some emotion in the little girl's voice, causing Lin Sheng to be slightly stunned. He turned his head, only to see the little girl's frail back. He could not help but be stunned. What did this mean? However, before Lin Sheng could figure out what was going on, he saw a scarlet drop of blood the size of a thumb fall in front of him. The terrifying energy fluctuations caused him to be slightly shocked. He carefully turned his head to look at the little girl, but the latter still only had a cold back view. This caused him to laugh bitterly. After thinking for a while, he realized that she seemed to know Yin Nuoxing. Lin Sheng nervously put away the drop of God Emperor's blood essence and sat up on the altar. He cupped his hands at the little girl and said hesitantly, "Thank you. Take me to him." The little girl turned her head and glanced at Lin Sheng indifferently, causing him to be stunned. Just as he was about to refuse, he saw that her eyes were no longer cold and indifferent. There was even a hint of a smile on her face. This caused him to be stunned again and again. After a long while, he nodded hesitantly. "That, although I shouldn't ask too much, but what is your relationship with Brother Yin?" Lin Sheng asked hesitantly. "Do you know his name?" The little girl raised her eyes slightly, glanced at him, and asked meaningfully. Lin Sheng was stunned when he heard this. Then, he shook his head with a bitter smile. Yin Nuoxing's name had always been a mystery. It was better to say that the latter had never told them. Even his name was not on the devil ranking. This made Lin Sheng very curious. However, the latter kept him in suspense and kept saying that he would find out one day. Gradually, he stopped asking. You just need to know that I know. The little girl glanced at him. Then, a sweet smile appeared on her expressionless face. Lin Sheng was also stunned. He sighed softly and said that, I still have companions who are lost in this world. I have to find them. Brother Yun and the others will also find them. If you want me to be your hired thug and help you reap benefits, then be more straightforward. Before he could finish, the little girl glanced at him, causing Lin Sheng to embarrassedly laugh. He did have such thoughts. The little girl glanced at him and said indifferently, It's not a problem to help you 2 or 3 times. After all, I'm looking for someone. It's all your fault for breaking the token just now. Lin Sheng scratched his head. At that time, I didn't know about the relationship between the two of you. I was just afraid that you would harm him. Lin Sheng waved his hand and soared into the sky. The little girl behind him took a step forward and easily followed beside him. He hesitated for a moment, but still carefully asked, What's your name? The little girl narrowed her eyes, as if she was just taking a leisurely stroll. After a long while, she replied softly, Yishi. When Lin Sheng heard this name, he was slightly stunned. Then, the memories in his mind started to churn. However, after rummaging for a while, he still could not find any information related to this name. However, the little girl closed her eyes tightly and ignored him. Immediately, he could only laugh bitterly. Although he could not figure out the origins of this mysterious little girl, he originally wanted to find out more about her relationship with Yin Nuoxing. Then, you would consider whether he should bring her over. However, it seemed that he could not get any information out of her. Moreover, there was one thing that was undeniable. She had extremely terrifying power. That kind of power might be very powerful even among the high-level gods. Naturally, Lin Sheng was 100% cautious and fearful of her. However, looking at the current situation, it seemed that she would not give up until she found Yin Nuoxing. Lin Sheng did not dare to object to this. He had just taken a stroll through the gates of hell, and his clothes were still drenched in sweat. If he angered her, he was afraid that he would have to die again. After leaving the forest, it took about half an hour to leave the mountain range and arrive at the plains. In front of him, there was a continuous stretch of huge palaces. At this moment, many people were rushing into the palaces like bandits, plundering everything that could possibly be found inside. It seems that not everyone will rush to the Oracle Crystal Pillar immediately. Seeing the chaotic situation here, Lin Sheng sighed in his heart. He glanced around and lost interest. This place was still very far from the Oracle Crystal Pillar. According to his estimation, the Crystal Pillar should be at the center of this world. At this moment, he was still in the outer region. Looking at Yi Shi beside him, Lin Sheng thought for a moment. Then, his body moved and directly rushed into the palace. He rushed straight into the depths of the palace. Occasionally, there were people with fierce eyes who came forward to stop him. Before he could signal them, Yi Shi slapped those people and the palace away. When some people saw the palace disappear in an instant, they swallowed hard. They did not dare to act recklessly and allowed the 2 people to pass through. After flying rapidly in the chaotic palace for more than 10 minutes, Lin Sheng did not get distracted and headed straight into the depths. Occasionally, he would look into the courtyard and see that this direction seemed to lead to the Crystal Pillar. This place seemed to be a huge palace complex. After another 10 minutes, the Lin Sheng duo's figures flashed past corridor after corridor and stone room after stone room. They did not stop at all. Not long after, they charged into a huge palace. Looking at its size, it seemed to be the main hall. Moreover, a large hole had already been blasted open at the main door. Lin Sheng stopped and looked inside the palace. He could see the chaotic situation inside. Originally, he wanted to leave immediately. However, when he saw the situation inside, he was stunned. In the palace, there were 3 people rushing towards the door. Behind them, there was a large group of people who looked like wolves and tigers. Their eyes were so red that they were almost purple. They seemed to be extremely furious. Looking at their posture, they seemed to be chasing after the 3 people in front of them. Lin Sheng was not interested in this. It was very normal to snatch things in this place. He did not have the time to care about it. However, Lin Sheng recognized the three people who were being chased. They were Senior Chuan Mu and the other two. Chapter 678. The spacious hall was extremely grand. The black walls had traces of the passage of time. Those huge stone pillars had collapsed in disorder, lying across the path of the hall. They were broken and decayed. Cracks and cracks covered the walls and the stone pillars that were still standing. It was as if the hall would collapse at any moment. The hall was filled with many figures. At this moment, they were like a pack of wolves, chasing after the entrance of the hall with red eyes. The three fleeing figures at the front of the large hall were two men and a woman. The woman had a tall and sexy figure. Her face was cold and elegant. At this moment, there was some excitement and joy on her ice-cold, pretty face. The clothes on her body were somewhat tattered, and she appeared to be in a somewhat miserable state. As for the other two men, one was as gentle as a scholar, while the other was as strong as a metal tower. Their faces were half panicked and half excited. They could not help but laugh out loud as they flew toward the entrance of the large hall. Upon hearing the furious roars of the people behind them, numerous energy light pillars shot out and landed beside the three of them like arrows. A series of explosions sounded, causing the three of them to appear even more miserable. The three people being chased were naturally Lin Kuang, Chuan Mu, and Zhong Songling. At this moment, they looked very happy. "Bastard, hand over the things, or we'll keep you here." Among that group of people, the group at the front seemed to be from the same team. One of them roared furiously, and the energy he released became even more violent, bombarding the hall indiscriminately. "Bah, I got it with my own ability. Take it back if you dare. Ha ha ha." Chuan Mu spat. Then, his thunderous laughter resounded in the hall. The eyes of the people behind him were burning with anger. The three of them were emitting the aura of divine emperors. However, it was not only that. Their single attribute could be raised to the level of a divine emperor in a short time. For example, their speed was already the speed of a divine emperor expert. The effect of the elixir was amazing. If they wanted to, they could join forces and attack with the full strength of three divine emperors. However, there were too many people behind them. They had no choice but to run away. Although there were many divine emperors behind them, the distance between them was increasing. "Stay!" Among the group of people, a man suddenly roared. With a wave of his arm, he raised a red bow that was 3 meters long. He placed a crimson arrow on the bowstring, pulled the bowstring to a full moon, and then released the arrow. The sound of the arrows tearing through the air caused Chuan Mu and the other two to freeze for a moment. The three of them looked at each other, then turned their heads in unison. Their speed instantly decreased, and at the same time, their strength increased explosively. The three of them simultaneously struck out with their palms. Boom! 3 palms against 1 arrow, and a muffled sound of impact rang out. The red arrow was stopped by the power of the 3 palms, but the huge force behind the arrow caused Chuan Mu and the other two to tremble slightly, and a stream of blood flowed out from the corner of their mouths. During the chase, the red arrow had brought them a lot of trouble. Every time the arrow was shot, it would slow them down, and the people behind them would catch up. Lin Ming grabbed the red arrow and put it away. Then Chuan Mu laughed and said, "Ha! This is the 9th spiritual arrow. Let's see how many more you can shoot." Zhong Songling gritted her teeth, and her jade-like hand took out a huge golden bell. The surface of the golden bell was engraved with many golden lumps, and there were also strange beasts. When the bell appeared, an extremely terrifying force rolled out, and one could faintly see countless beasts howling at the sky. The people chasing behind them looked at the appearance of the huge bell, and their eyes could not help but drool. Then their eyes turned red and crazy. This huge bell had been placed on the stone platform at the innermost part of the hall, and it was motionless like a sculpture. However, Lin Ming was the first to discover the problem with this sculpture, and with a palm, she shattered the dust and dirt on it. As the dust and dirt dispersed, a rolling energy was emitted, and golden light shone brightly. Vaguely, one could hear the howls of thousands of demonic beasts. That terrifying power must be a divine weapon, and its level was not low. It should be a middle-grade divine weapon, which was a level 8 weapon. The words middle-rank divine weapon were enough to drive many people crazy. In the Golden Jade Palace, a low-rank divine weapon was worth billions. Normally, few people would take it out for auction. Now that a middle-rank divine weapon was seen here, the shock it caused was obviously not small. While many people were still in a daze, Lin Kuei and the other two suddenly picked up the 10,000 beast bell and started running. When the crowd came back to their senses, they were already halfway through the hall. Then, a group of howls and roars rang out. I'll use you to test the power of this middle-grade divine weapon. Zhong Songling's voice was cold. Her jade-like hand shook the huge bell, and the power in the hall crazily gathered towards the mouth of the bell, causing the space to tremble slightly. Be careful. Defend with all your strength. The power of a middle-grade divine weapon in the hands of a divine emperor is enough to display the power of a divine underworld expert. Everyone's eyes narrowed slightly when they saw the terrifying energy being born. The person at the front who had pulled the bow fiercely roared. Soon after, he was the first to condense an energy barrier. When the people behind him saw this, they also roared in unison. Soon after, a gorgeous energy barrier condensed in front of them, blocking the front. Looking at the crowd's defense, Zhong Songling's pretty face darkened. She hesitated for a while, and suddenly a force came from the two hands that were on her shoulders. She gritted her teeth and wanted to activate the myriad beast bell, which she was not familiar with yet. However, a familiar playful voice suddenly rang out, causing the three of them to be slightly stunned. Haha, you're bullying me with numbers. Aren't you embarrassed? That voice quickly resounded throughout the large hall. At the same time, an extremely frightening energy ripple was emitted. Under that energy, everyone's expressions became a little clearer. Soon after, their swiftly charging bodies seemed to have collectively stepped into a swamp as they suddenly froze. In the end, some people stopped too quickly. Before those behind them could react, they collided head-on with each other. Immediately, numerous figures in the large hall collided together. The force of the collision caused the people who were caught in the middle to suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood. The crowd in the large hall also swayed left and right, causing the originally chaotic hall to become even more chaotic. Ah, damn it. You bumped into me. My waist. It's flashing. Oh, when he saw the scene of people bumping into each other, Lin Sheng touched his face in astonishment. He glanced at the little girl beside him, and without thinking, he shouted at Chuan Mu and the other two, "Let's go." After he finished speaking, he suddenly rushed out of the hall. Chuan Mu and the other two also howled like wolves. Taking advantage of the chaos, they hurriedly rushed out and disappeared in a flash, leaving behind a group of people in the hall who were wailing incessantly. Ah, that bastard brat. Bastard. Bastard. A middle-tier divine artifact. He flew away just like that. Lin Sheng and the rest did not even turn their heads as they rushed towards the depths of the corridor. Along the way, they collectively sent those who tried to block them flying with a slap. When they saw these people rushing forward, everyone was so shocked that they hurriedly dodged. They did not dare to stop them, and allowed the 5 people to rush out of the hall. On the flat ground outside the palace, Lin Sheng and the other 3 lay sprawled out on the grass, panting heavily. Although they were very tired, they also felt very excited. It was like lying down on the grass after running with all their might. It was quite comfortable. After Lin Sheng and the other 2 rested for a while, they all sat up and looked at each other. Then, they could not help but laugh. Chuan Mu reached out and patted Lin Sheng on the shoulder, laughing, "Not bad, Junior. You did well." Lin Sheng smiled bitterly and waved his hand. This had nothing to do with him. He was not the one who released that energy. At this time, Zhong Songling also saw Yi Shi, who was standing silently at the side. Mei Mao paused for a moment. She could feel the terrifying power coming from the latter. She was also slightly surprised and said, "Junior, who is she? Speaking of which, it's as long as a bolt of cloth." Lin Sheng smiled helplessly and explained the matter briefly. He did not tell her everything, such as what happened at the altar. She's looking for Junior. I don't know why such a strong person is looking for him. Lin Rant's eyes narrowed. Many thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant, but he did not dare to say them out loud. Lin Sheng also shook his head. He did not ask in detail. He was worried that if he accidentally angered this god, she would get angry and send him flying with a slap. If you've rested well, let's go take a look at the oracle crystal. I've been thinking about it for a long time. Junior, Ding Mengyu, and the others might have already rushed over. Chuan Mu scratched his head and smiled. Lin Sheng nodded. Now, he was also very interested in the oracle crystal pillar. He had just entered the 19th level, but he had already obtained the elemental fragments, the Divine Emperor's blood essence, and the 10,000 bee spell. Although Lin Sheng did not see how strong it was, he could sense that it was about to be activated. Moreover, it was a mid-tier divine artifact. He just did not know how powerful the oracle crystal pillar placed in the center of this world was. Could it really be as powerful as the rumors said? Could anyone who comprehended the way under the crystal pillar step into that legendary level? The five of them did not delay for long. After resting for a while, they determined the route and pushed their speed to the limit, flying towards the oracle crystal pillar. Along the way, the plains became mountains, the mountains became basins, and the basins became seas. The five of them flew over countless terrains and terrains. Along the way, they saw many palaces and caves. Intense sounds of fighting could be heard from those places. However, this time, the five of them did not stop. They did not stop along the way. Even so, after 2 hours, they still had not reached the crystal pillar. Although they were a little closer, they were still at the end of the horizon. This made Lin Sheng and the rest speechless. This world seemed to be very big. In the sky, they could vaguely see some light flashing past, flying towards the crystal pillar as fast as lightning. Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, and the other two looked at each other. They also pushed their speed to the level of divine emperors and rushed towards the center. After another 2 hours, they began to slow down. This was because in the distance, beyond the mountains, there was a vast grassy plain that was about 100,000 feet wide. The plain was already filled with countless figures, as many as the sand in the sea. Waves of terrifying energy rippled out, causing the power of the heavens and the earth to boil. Countless experts had already gathered here. Lin Sheng could not help but be surprised when he saw the terrifying number of people in front of him. Did these guys come for the oracle crystal pillar as soon as they entered? Lin Sheng and the others swept across the sky and scanned the plain below. As they got closer, they could clearly see the appearance of the huge crystal pillar. The bottom of the crystal pillar was extremely thick, and the higher it was, the thinner it became. It was at least 100,000 feet tall, and it was a square crystal pillar. The energy in the crystal pillar seemed to have solidified and flowed slowly. Its surface was as smooth as a mirror, and it exuded a strange aura. On the huge plain, there were many crystal pillars that were thousands of feet tall. However, compared to the crystal pillar in the center, the energy was more mottled. Some of them were even broken. However, the strange aura was just as strong. This strange aura made Lin Sheng feel slightly uneasy. He kept feeling that something was wrong. I see. The oracle crystal pillar. So, this is what it is. Yi Shi, who had been silent all this while approached the crystal pillar. Her eyes trembled slightly, and she came to a sudden realization. Lin Sheng and the others looked at her, but they only saw her smile. That smile seemed to be mocking them. She looked at the sea of people below, as if she was laughing at everyone below. Lin Sheng looked at her strangely. Although he was puzzled, he did not ask anything. He scanned the area below and was slightly stunned. This place was very calm. Everyone was cultivating with their eyes closed. They were also very careless. In a place with so many people, they were not afraid of being ambushed. Furthermore, he did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the closer one was to the crystal pillar, the stronger one was. Could this also be a classification? Perhaps the closer one is to the crystal pillar, the more one can feel the strange energy. Chuan Mu scratched his head and guessed. Let's go down and cultivate. Let's see if we can get lucky. Lin Ming smiled and nodded at Lin Sheng. He was about to descend. If you want to die, sit down and cultivate. I have already reminded you. However, before they could descend, a faint laughter caused their bodies to suddenly freeze. A gust of cold wind blew, causing their bodies to turn cold. Chapter 679. The enormous crystal pillars emitted the light of energy. They appeared incomparably brilliant and beautiful. Many 10,000-foot-tall crystal pillars stood on the crystal pillar plains. Every crystal pillar was surrounded by people. However, no one had set foot in the area of 100,000 feet in front of the enormous crystal pillar. It was as though that area was a forbidden zone. At the edge of the plain, in midair, Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, and Yi Shi felt a chill run down their spines. They looked at Yi Shi in confusion, not understanding what she meant. If you want to die, just sit down and cultivate? Wouldn't that mean that the hundreds of thousands of people on the plain were all seeking death? That wasn't possible. There were many strong gods here, and they were real gods. They weren't fake divine emperors like them who used pills to temporarily raise their attributes to the divine emperor level. Among the many people below, there were a few crystal pillars that were thousands of feet tall near the huge crystal pillars. Lin Sheng saw Qi Yao, whom he had met at the auction, and the group of people from the Xianyin sect. It seemed that they were all immersed in cultivation. If he could trick them now, even if they had strong gods, they would be injured or dead. However, this place was too quiet, as if everyone couldn't wait to cultivate. What do you mean? Chuan Mu couldn't help but scratch his head with his palms. He looked at Yi Shi in confusion, not knowing what she was talking about. Whoosh! Before Yi Shi could answer, there was a burst of wind in the distance, causing Lin Sheng and the rest to be slightly stunned. However, when they saw who it was, they relaxed their vigilance. Not far away, a woman in a silver dress walked over slowly. Her silver eyes were very bright, and there was a gentle and charming girl beside her. Meng Yu. Zhong Songling saw the two people and was slightly happy. When she saw that they were unharmed, she was even more relieved. Almost everyone had gathered. The two who appeared were naturally Ding Mengyu and Jun Luo Yi. They seemed to have arrived a long time ago, but they hadn't cultivated. They were observing the surroundings. When Jun Luo Yi saw Yi Shi, she couldn't help but be stunned. Mei Mao's eyes flashed. When the latter saw Jun Luo Yi, her eyes also flickered slightly. Then, she lightly nodded and didn't say anything. Jun Luo Yi also lightly smiled and nodded. Although Ding Mengyu and Lin Sheng didn't know who Yi Shi was, Jun Luo Yi had already seen Yi Shi in the Xianlong continent. When Ding Mengyu saw Lin Sheng and the others, she nodded slightly. Then, Mei Mao scanned the surroundings and paused for a moment on Yi Shi. However, when she saw Lin Sheng giving her a look, she quickly turned her gaze away. When she did not see Yin Nuoxing, she could not help but frown and ask, "Where are Junior and the others? Let's burn the tokens and inform Junior Brother and the others to gather." Chuan Mu smiled and took out a colorful token. After taking a look at it, he clenched his hand. A flame rose and quickly enveloped the token. In a few seconds, the token was burned to ashes. Ding Mingyu nodded. Then, she looked at the crystal pillar plains below. Her eyebrows slightly knitted together as she said in a solemn voice, "There's something strange here. Let's not go down." Then, she pointed at the edge of the surroundings. Lin Sheng and the others also looked over. They discovered that there were quite a few people standing in the air at the edge. Their hands were crossed in front of their chests. Their gazes were as if they were watching a good show as they watched the people cultivating on the crystal pillar plains. There are still some people among you who are vigilant. When Yi Shi heard this, her wine-red eyes glanced at Lin Sheng and the others. She couldn't help but ridicule them, causing them to be speechless. Is there a problem with the crystal pillars? Or was there a problem with the energy here? However, so many divine experts have gone to cultivate. It's impossible that they can't sense it. Chuan Mu frowned. He couldn't understand. If there was a problem, why were so many people cultivating? Yishi glanced at him. A gentle breeze blew her black hair, and her pleated skirt swayed slightly. Then she sighed softly. She looked down with a complicated gaze and said, "On the central stone tablet of the 14th floor of the maze, there is information about the oracle crystal pillar inscribed. The most moving part is the sentence. Those who comprehend the way can advance to the later stages of the divine level." How comical! A divine expert is actually confused by a sentence and can't even see such a thing. Of course, we can't rule out such a possibility. However, if one can advance to the later stages of the divine level just by comprehending the way, wouldn't that be child's play? Now, in the divine realm, all the ancient later stages of the divine level have gone into hibernation. They basically don't exist. There are countless emperor gods, but no new later stages of the divine level have been born. How can one advance to the later stages of the divine level just because they want to? Looking at the people below who were seizing the time to cultivate, Yishi couldn't help but sneer. Then she said, "You haven't advanced to the early stages of the divine level, don't understand. Every time a beginner divine expert advances a realm, they need time to accumulate. You will understand this when you advance to the early stages of the divine level. Those who sit down to cultivate will also understand this. However, it's because of this understanding that they have an excessive desire for power, an excessive desire for that legendary level. It can even be said that they are obsessed with it, which led to this scene, hundreds of thousands of divine experts cultivating together." At this point, Yishi flicked her wide sleeves and curled her lips in disdain. She sneered and said, "How ridiculous. Only those who are too weak or too strong can clearly feel that something is wrong and don't sit down to cultivate." When Ding Mingyu and the others heard this, they also looked at the people who didn't sit down. Then they felt that those people were mostly demigod level and demon level experts. There were also some divine experts, but there weren't many of them. It seemed to confirm the statement of too weak or too strong. Her wine-red eyes scanned the crowd below indifferently. Her small mouth opened and closed, as if she was silently counting something. Then, she waved her hand lightly, as if she was calculating. After a moment, she sighed softly and said, "If I'm not wrong, swoosh." Before she finished speaking, there was a sound of wind breaking in the distance. Ding Mingyu and the others turned their gazes and saw a brilliant, colorful figure appear. There were 3 people following behind her. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. It seemed that everyone was fine. The brilliant, colorful figure just came to their side and brought the 3 of them to stand firm. Before they could say anything, the petite wine-red figure turned into a light shadow and pounced toward Nuashing. Lin Sheng and the others were shocked. "Big Brother Nuo." However, before they could react, an extremely attached voice shocked them. "Big Brother Nuo? What's going on?" Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the others were stunned when they saw Yishi pounce into Yun Nuashing's arms like a child. They couldn't help but be startled. They turned their gazes and looked at the latter strangely. Jun Luo, he wasn't surprised at all. She even chuckled. She knew that the relationship between the 2 of them wasn't ordinary back in a mystic dragon continent. At that time, when Yin Nuashing was subduing the Een spirit fire, Yishi was sitting beside the heaven pit, waiting for her without sleep or rest. "Little Shi, why are you here?" Yin Nuashing saw Shi before she arrived. At this moment, she was bumped into by her. Then, she smiled and hugged her. She rubbed her hair and smiled gently. "You were, and the others said that you were wandering around Xiaoguang City. Did you come to this underground maze?" "I've already stayed on the 19th floor for half a month. I still haven't found the way to the last floor, the 20th floor. I'm bored to death walking around here." Yishi giggled. Her delicate face gently rubbed against Yun Nuashing's beautiful face. Then, she suddenly raised her head and looked at the latter strangely. She asked curiously, "How did Big Brother Nuo become Big Sister Nuo?" Yin Nuashing seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. Her face darkened. She shook her head with a bitter smile. It was really hard to explain. Xiaoguang City isn't the only maze that leads to the underground maze. I jumped down from a hole in the center of the barren land. It leads directly to the 15th floor. It's just that my head hurts. Yishi rubbed her forehead and muttered. Then, she began to laugh mischievously. Yin Nuashing was speechless. He had come across a volcanic crater by chance, and it took him a long time to reach the 18th floor from the 10th floor. In the end, Yishi found a hole and jumped directly to the 15th floor. Wasn't this leap a little too impressive? Lin Sheng saw Yi. She curled up in Yin Nuashing's arms like a child, whispering to each other like a child, kissing his cheeks from time to time, and giggling from time to time. He was instantly dumbfounded. Where was that mysterious expert who disintegrated a godson with an array, forced him to the brink of death, and suppressed him completely with one hand? She scared everyone with her strength alone. If he hadn't seen this scene with his own eyes, he definitely wouldn't have thought that the Yi Shi in these two images was the same person. Your strength? Yin Nuashing temporarily didn't have the time to care about the dumbfounded Lin Sheng and the others. She smiled at them and looked at Yi Shi with her colorful eyes. At this moment, she actually couldn't sense her strength. I recovered. I found a bottle of pills in the maze that allowed me to recover to the peak of the underworld monarch realm without any side effects. I even improved a little. When the time is right, I will try to break through to the God Emperor realm. Yishi giggled. Then, she glanced at her face proudly and said, Hurry up and praise me. Yes, little Shi is the best. Yin Nuashing smiled and rubbed her head. Then, he was stunned for a moment and blinked. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly and said, I thought you would abandon me after you recovered your strength. It seems like I thought too much. Brother Nuo, is little Shi that kind of person? Hearing this, Yishi pouted and looked at Yin Nuashing's wine-red eyes with some displeasure. After all, you were once a high and mighty underworld monarch realm expert. Yin Nuashing shrugged. He was actually mentally prepared for this. A underworld monarch realm expert who had lost her strength and followed him in humiliation. If she recovered her strength, the first thing she would do would be to kill him. Moreover, he was the main culprit who caused her strength to decline. Yishi seemed to know what Yin Nuashing was thinking. She lowered her head slightly, and her eyes flickered. Then, she leaned on his shoulder and murmured, What happened in the past is in the past. Even if you hate me, you can't hate me anymore. From now on, I am Yishi. Didn't I say so, Brother Nuo? And in Brother Nuo's eyes, there's nothing to be proud of about being an underworld monarch realm expert. Yin Nuashing smiled and rubbed her head. He said, It's my fault. I shouldn't have doubted you. You saw that the two of them were talking endlessly. She puffed up her cheeks and tugged at Yin Nuashing's sleeve. She said, Brother Yin, don't dawdle. Now is not the time to dawdle. If you have something to say, it's not too late to go back and say it. Hearing this, Yin Nuashing and Yishi laughed embarrassedly. The latter looked at him strangely and wanted to see what he wanted to say. Yin Nuashing nodded and walked closer to Ding Mingyu and the others. However, when he saw their strange gazes, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. He waved his hand and said in a serious voice, There's a situation. Chapter 680. Is there a problem? Lin Sheng and the others' faces darkened when they heard this. Just now, they kept saying that there was a problem. Could it be that? Yin Nuashing nodded. He turned around and looked at the huge oracle crystal pillar. Actually, he only noticed it when he got closer. Combined with what you said about the demon world, he was even more certain that there was a problem with this so-called oracle crystal pillar that could let people reach the god rank. The oracle crystal pillar in the demon realm had disappeared for a period of time, together with the region where the oracle crystal pillar was located. No, instead of saying that it disappeared, it's better to say that it was blocked. Because there was nothing happening in that region for a period of time, it was even locked up. There were several big forces in that region, all of which were ranked in the top 20 in the demon realm. After 1 year, it was reopened, leaving nothing inside except for hundreds of dead cities. After that, after a long time, that region recovered its vitality and gave birth to a demon god. That demon god said that he had comprehended something in the oracle crystal pillar, so he reached the heavens in a single bound, Yu-Er's words were still echoing in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more serious he felt. He felt that something was very wrong, especially when he saw so many people cultivating. And what Yishi said just now, "Little Shi, are you sure that this underground maze has 20 floors?" Yin Nuoshing asked. Yes, it was written on the steel on the 14th floor. The 19th floor is the guide, and the 20th floor is the destination. It hides the biggest secret of the God world. This is also the reason why everyone is fighting to come to the 19th floor. However, I didn't find the path to the 20th floor on the 19th floor. This is a sealed world. There isn't even an exit. Yishi nodded gloomily. After she came to the 15th floor, she took the wrong path to the 14th floor. After she saw the information recorded on the steel, she came to the 19th floor. She was trapped here until today, unable to get out. We've also used the space teleportation array, but the space here. Yishi shook her head, then said in a serious voice, "This place is like a prison. It's completely sealed off. We can enter, but we can't exit." Yin Nuoshing's expression turned a little grave when he heard this. He waved his hand, and the star map appeared in his hand. Specks of light flickered as silver-blue energy flowed along his arm and into the star map. However, his expression changed a moment later. The star map is no longer useful. Does this count as being trapped here? It's like greedy adventurers falling into a trap for their own greed. Little Moon couldn't help but sigh. Even the two strongest people in her heart said that they couldn't get out, so she also thought that they couldn't get out. How could this be? Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the others were stunned when they heard this. However, their temperament was still very good. They did not panic, but they found it hard to believe. If one could enter the 19th level but not exit, then what did the owner of this maze design the 19th level for? Why did he make an oracle crystal pillar here? No, there's an exit. Or rather, it's the only exit that I think. At that moment, Yin Nuoshing sighed. He looked into the distance and raised his head. When everyone saw this, they also raised their heads and looked at the huge oracle crystal pillar. Could it be that he was talking about this? Maybe there's an answer there, but I've already tried just now. The area in front of the oracle crystal pillar is a forbidden area. I can't get in either. There's a very, very hard barrier. Yin Nuoshing sighed. That's the only thing worth mentioning in this 19th level. However, I still don't quite understand what it's for. I have a guess, but I don't know if it's accurate. Yishi was also stunned when she heard this. She whispered, "You can't even break the Nether Void sword?" Yin Nuoshing shook his head gently. In fact, he had already used all the means at his disposal, but he couldn't get close to the oracle crystal pillar. It was as if something was protecting the oracle crystal pillar. I have a bad premonition. Yin Nuoshing turned around and looked at the huge crystal pillar plane with a serious expression. His chest felt a little stuffy. Every time he had such a reaction, nothing good would come of it. However, he had no idea what form the so-called danger would take. Ding Mingyu glanced at him, and then at Jun Luo Yi. She lowered her head slightly. Then, as if she had thought of something, she said, "There might be clues somewhere. Let's go take a look." Yin Nuoshing nodded when he heard this. Lin Sheng and the others didn't have any objections. Ding Mingyu also nodded when she saw this. Then, with a wave of her jade-like hand, her delicate body shot out, heading away from the oracle crystal pillar. Lin Sheng and the others quickly followed. Yin Nuoshing turned back to look at the oracle crystal pillar one last time. He frowned, then hurriedly followed with Yi Shi in his arms. When Yin Nuoshing and the others left the oracle crystal pillar, many people also flew towards the oracle crystal pillar from the outer regions. When he flew past everyone, he could see the impatience in their eyes. He couldn't help but sigh. He couldn't blame these people. The temptation of the latter divine stage was too great. As long as they could reach that level, it wouldn't be a pity no matter what price they had to pay. Only people like Yin Nuoshing and the others could still maintain their rationality. After flying along a very strange mountain range for an hour, Ding Mingyu constantly looked around, trying to determine the direction. A moment later, she made a slight turn and flew in another direction. Yin Nuoshing and the others also moved and followed. After flying over the sea of trees for another 10 minutes, everyone gradually slowed down. After passing through layers of mountain ranges, what appeared in front of them was a huge basin. Above the basin, there was a huge energy barrier that covered them like an inverted curve. Black runes flowed on the surface of the energy barrier. The nearby heaven and earth energy and elemental energy crazily surged towards the energy barrier of the black runes. The surging energy formed a long river of energy in the sky. The terrifying energy caused the expressions of Ding Mingyu and the others to change slightly. This is... Yin Nuoxing looked at the huge energy barrier with a grave expression. The terrifying energy emitted from it already required him to use a divine artifact to resist it. When we were teleported to the 19th level, Luo, E, and I appeared here. However, there were not many people gathered here. We weren't the only ones who saw this situation. Many people also tried to break through the energy barrier, but without exception, they were all seriously injured. Ding Mingyu looked ahead and frowned slightly. That huge black rune energy shield covered the center of the basin, and she couldn't see what was going on inside. She also saw a few strong practitioners of gods being torn to shreds by the black runes. Oh, it could be the residence of the owner of this maze, or the place where he died. Yishi's small face also frowned. She could feel extremely terrifying energy fluctuations from the energy barrier. The energy was even stronger than hers. If she tried to break it by force, it might cause a rebound. With that level of energy rebound, she was afraid that she would die without a doubt. The owner of this maze might be an extremely powerful Emperor God expert. Moreover, his attainments and formations are comparable to a great grandmaster, or even a demigod master. Yishi took a light breath and exhaled in a serious tone. Magic Array Masters at the 8th level of the Divine level were great grandmasters. Magic Array Masters above the Divine level were the legendary Divine Array Masters. Although she had seen the methods of Emperor Wanfa, he was far from reaching the level of a demigod master. However, the methods of the owner of the maze seemed to be stronger than the latter. If she was not wrong, he should have reached the level of a demigod master. Emperor God Expert. Chuan Mu and the others sucked in a breath of cold air. To them, an expert of that level was an existence that they could not hope to reach. They were experts at the top of the pyramid in the myriad god realm, and they had never even seen an expert of that level before. It seems that the good things in this maze aren't as easy to obtain as we thought, Lin Sheng said with a bitter smile. They had run to the 19th level and already had a small harvest. They thought that they had already taken advantage of it. However, it was obvious that the more precious things were isolated. There are no signs of life within a radius of 10,000 miles. Yishi suddenly laughed softly. Then, she raised her head and poked Yin Nuoxing's face with her small hand. She smiled and said, Xiaoxi, I can't deal with that thing either. What does Brother Nuo plan to do? Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. If it were any other time, he would have taken out the Netherworld Ruined sword and destroyed the energy shield in front of him. However, at this moment, he turned around and looked at Lin Sheng and the rest beside him. He could not help but sigh. This was not a good idea. Let's go in and take a look. We're already at the entrance. Moreover, we can't get out now. We can only find our own way out, right? Yin Nuoxing sighed softly. Forget it. Sometimes, he could not care less about his identity being exposed. But that energy shield. Chuan Nuoxing was stunned. He had originally wanted to retreat. However, when he heard Chuan Nuoxing's words, he was also stunned. However, before he could say anything, he saw Yin Nuoxing put Yishi down and suddenly charge out. Ding Mingyu also could not react for a moment. When she came back to her senses, she saw that Yin Nuoxing had already charged out like a flying eagle. A giant purplish-black sword that was 10 feet long appeared in his hand. He grabbed it with all his might and rushed to the front of the energy shield. Then, he suddenly slashed down with the sword. Chi! The sound of paper being torn apart resounded in the sky. Then, Ding Mingyu and the rest were stunned to see that the energy shield, which was surging with black runes, had been torn open. Yin Nuoxing was holding the giant sword and looking back at them. Coming quickly, This energy shield will repair itself. Yin Nuoxing waved at Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the rest as he said. As soon as his soft voice sounded, Xian and the rest hurriedly landed below the energy shield and burrowed into it. When Lin Sheng and the rest saw this, they hurriedly followed. They did not have the time to think about how he had been able to slash open the energy shield so easily. As everyone entered, the giant hole slowly closed up at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yin Nuoxing saw that it had completely closed up. Only then did he nod his head. His wrist that was holding the Netherworld Ruins sword turned slightly. Then he cast his gaze towards the center of the energy shield. Lin Sheng and the rest also swept their gazes across the slightly dark center of the huge basin. Then they narrowed their eyes and looked in front of them. In front of them, where the black fog lingered, black crystal pillars could be faintly seen. The crystal pillars looked no different from the crystal pillars on the crystal pillar plane. The only difference was that the crystal pillars here were black. From afar, they looked like dark daggers, causing fear to rise in people's hearts. On the contrary, it was very calm inside the energy shield. There was no energy flowing. However, Yin Nuoxing's expression was still slightly serious and vigilant. He nodded at Yi Shi. The latter also understood. She stood in front of Ding Mingyu and the rest, and said to them, "Don't stray too far from me." Lin Xing nodded. He also knew that this place was not a joke. Yi Shi was a god expert. It would naturally be much safer to stay by her side. Yin Nuoxing's gaze swept across. His six-colored wings slowly spread out. His gaze was serious as he looked at the centermost position. There was a huge black crystal pillar that was tens of thousands of feet tall. It just happened to be at the top of the energy shield. Yin Nuoxing's gaze slowly swept across. Finally, it focused on the huge crystal pillar in front of them. A strong sense of vigilance welled up in his heart. His footsteps also slowly came to a halt. He stared at the crystal pillar that was less than 10 meters away. Suddenly, some dark energy surged up from the black crystal pillar. Then, suddenly, some cracks appeared on the crystal pillar and slowly spread across the entire crystal pillar. "Be careful!" Yin Nuoxing's eyes narrowed slightly. He waved his hand, and a gentle force pushed Xian and the rest back a little. Then, he stomped his feet on the ground. Bang! Just as Yin Nuoxing stomped his feet, the crystal pillar that was full of cracks suddenly burst open. A black mist-like palm suddenly stretched out from within and slammed towards Yin Nuoxing. Terrifying black energy swept out like a storm, causing Lin Sheng and the rest to feel their breathing become sluggish. The energy in their bodies even stopped circulating. However, just as this feeling was born, Yi Shi gently exhaled. A similar black energy surged out from her petite body. Although it was also black, it appeared very gentle. Lin Sheng and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. The suffocating feeling also dissipated. Qila, when the huge black palm stretched out, Yin Nuoxing's body had already shot out like a long arrow. The Netherworld Ruins sword suddenly drew a perfect half-moon arc in front of him. A terrifying sword aura swept past in front of him with a loud explosion. The area of 1,000 feet in front of him was flattened by this sword. Even the crystal pillars exploded. Bang! Bang! The huge crystal pillars continued to explode. Black figures stepped out of the crystal pillars like a stream of air. The hundreds and thousands of crystal pillars all exploded at the same time. Only the huge crystal pillar in the center did not react. The black figures in the shape of a stream of air struggled to step out of the crystal pillars. Their scarlet eyes were extremely ferocious and sinister. A monstrous, baleful aura continuously surged out. Extremely shocking energy fluctuations surged around these black creatures. Every one of them exceeded the range of his detection. Chapter 681. In the Black Basin, within the huge black rune energy barrier, the crystal pillars that had been erected on the ground exploded. Numerous unknown black creatures struggled to walk out of the crystal pillars. There were still crystal fragments on their bodies. These black creatures did not have a physical body, but they were filled with terrifying energy. Bang! Yin Nuoxing watched as the black creature in front of him exploded into a cloud of black air. The air swirled in the air for a while, then flew towards the huge crystal pillar in the center. In a few flashes, it arrived in front of the black crystal pillar and slowly melted into it. Don't move. Stay within the range of Little Shi's magic array. This unforeseen event caused Yun Nuoxing's expression to turn serious. He did not even turn his head to look at Xian, Dingmengyu, and the others. His colorful eyes looked at the black creatures in the air, and he gripped the Netherworld Ruined sword in his hand tightly. These black creatures in the air had strength that far surpassed that of a divine underworld expert. They were at least at the level of a heavenly god. One of them was nothing, but if there were 20, 200, or 2,000 of them piled up in front of him, even a Netherworld King expert would have to be on guard. Even a Netherworld Emperor expert would have to be alert. Don't! Suddenly, among the black creatures in the air, 10 figures approached each other. Their 10 outstretched hands turned into air currents that gathered in the air. In just a short moment, they condensed into a pair of huge black hands that were 1,000 feet long. Terrifying energy surged out, causing Yun Nuoxing's expression to change slightly. They can merge. This energy, Netherworld Emperor? The corners of Yun Nuoxing's eyes twitched. However, the situation in front of him did not allow him to be in a daze. After the huge black hands appeared, they suddenly slapped towards him. The terrifying energy wind pressed Yun Nuoxing's robes tightly against his body, causing him to grip the Netherworld Ruined sword tightly. With a low shout, he did not panic. His figure flashed, and like a bolt of black lightning, the Netherworld Ruined sword in his hand slashed horizontally without any fancy movements. Chi! The sword seemed to have cut through the air. It did not touch anything, but the 2 huge black hands suddenly exploded, along with the 10 airflow creatures. The 10 airflow slowly gathered together and turned into a huge black airflow in the shape of a cloud. Then it swept toward the huge black crystal pillar and merged into it in a moment. Cut it open. Lin Sheng looked at the giant black hand that had exploded without any resistance under the sword. His pupils shrank slightly. He clearly felt an irresistible and terrifying energy from the giant black hand. It had to be the energy of God. Although he was not very clear about the difference between each level of God, he had seen low-level gods. The energy of those masters was far less powerful than that of the black hand. Yishi glanced at him, but didn't say anything. They still couldn't understand the height that Yin Nuoxing could reach with her hand. Only those at her level could understand how terrifying and brutal that slender youth was. Swoosh! With a flash, Yin Nuoxing dodged a black shadow that suddenly attacked from the side. He retreated quickly and looked at the black airflow creatures that filled the sky. In his colorful eyes, a wisp of purple flame flashed, making him take a light breath. His 6 wings flapped fiercely, and a gust of wind blew, slapping the black airflow creatures away. Purple flames surged out of his palm and into the Netherworld Ruined sword. Yin Nuoxing's body turned in a circle and looked around. His 6 wings were still flapping nonstop, creating gusts of wind. His body was half a foot above the ground. As the purple flames surged out, the temperature of the sky suddenly rose sharply. In a few breaths, it rose to a shocking level. Yin Nuoxing lowered his head and looked at the Netherworld Ruined sword. He turned his hand around and held it high above his head. Then he suddenly stabbed it into the ground. A low roar came from his mouth. Phoenix, earth and flames. As the roar rang out, the Netherworld Ruin's sword stabbed into the ground. The ground suddenly lit up with rays of purple light. Along the cracks in the ground, an extremely powerful faint purple light burst forth and quickly spread out. In less than 3 seconds, it completely enveloped the black ground. Boom! The faint purple flames flew under the ground. Then, the ground began to tremble violently. Then, pillars of fire that were at least 100 feet tall suddenly erupted from the ground like a volcano. They quickly enveloped all the black shadows. The terrifying pillars of fire were like the flames of hell that had suddenly erupted. Thousands of flames lit up the dark area. They were like beautiful fireworks. Under the stunned gazes of Lin Sheng and the rest, they shot out and engulfed the thousands of black shadows. Streams of black air flowed out of the faint purple pillars of fire. Then they gathered towards the huge crystal pillar. As the streams of black air flowed in, the black crystal pillar lit up with a strange light. Under the illumination of the pillars of fire, Yin Nuoxing raised his head and looked at the huge black crystal pillar. He was stunned. Lin Sheng, Ding Mengyu, and the rest also looked at the crystal pillar. They were also stunned. Astonishment surged onto their faces. Inside the huge black crystal pillar, there was a person sealed inside with his eyes closed. The black air currents that had exploded all gathered around that person, making him look like a black hole. It was extremely terrifying. When everyone noticed the figure in the huge black crystal pillar, the person slowly opened his eyes. Lin Sheng and the rest were shocked. Yin Nuoxing hurriedly took a step back and returned to Xian and Yishi's side. He held the Netherworld Ruins sword in front of him and looked at the crystal pillar cautiously. The person sealed in the crystal pillar was not one of the black air creatures from before. Instead, it was a very young man. He wore a gray robe, and his expressionless face looked very handsome. While Yin Nuoxing and the rest were sizing up the gray-robed young man, the latter also slowly lowered his head. When he saw them in the black basin, his eyes were expressionless. A moment later, his mouth gently opened and moved slightly, as if he was saying something. Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes. He was too far away and did not notice the movement of his mouth. He only suddenly felt that the black basin was trembling slightly. The cracks that had lit up with faint purple flames were slowly expanding, as if there was an earthquake. Boom! The sudden explosion stunned Yin Nuoxing, Lin Sheng, and the rest. They hurriedly squatted down and stabilized their bodies. Their eyes uneasily scanned their surroundings. In the turbulent black basin, there was a frightening power that rose like a sleeping dragon that was slowly waking up. The power of that power caused Yin Nuoxing's eyes to flicker slightly. The cracks on the ground were torn open and waves of dust spewed out. Then, they spread throughout the black basin. The ground shook violently, and only the huge black crystal pillar remained unmoved. The young man sealed in the crystal pillar was also looking at Yin Nuoxing and the rest with an expressionless face. Bang! The ground suddenly burst open. A black object smashed the ground and emerged from the ground. Pieces of soil and rocks flew everywhere. Then, with a terrifying force, it ruthlessly smashed towards Yin Nuoxing and the rest like a meteorite. That enormous force caused the surrounding ground to burst open and large cracks to spread into the distance. Yin Nuoxing's eyes focused. She held the Netherworld Ruins sword in her right hand. The star power in her body surged and shot out like an arrow. The huge sword in her hand flickered with a faint purple-black light. An extremely terrifying energy that contained destructive power erupted like a tide, causing the pupils of Lin Sheng and the rest, as well as the gray-robed young man, to shrink. Clang! The size of the huge sword and the black object were completely disproportionate. When they collided, a terrifying sound resounded, causing Lin Sheng and the rest to hum in their ears. Two forces exploded at the point of contact, causing the ground to collapse dozens of meters deep. A crack burst out from the point of contact and rushed to the edge of the energy barrier. Rip! After the sound of the explosion, the sound of Earth being cut apart followed. The huge black object was cut in half by the Netherworld Ruins sword. Then, it strangely dissipated in the air like snow under the warm sun. Rumble! Yin Nuoxing's eyes hardened. After the huge black object disappeared, an even more intense vibration was emitted from the ground. This time, the vibration caused the huge black crystal pillar in the middle to vibrate as well. Numerous cracks emerged from the bottom of the crystal pillar, after which they swiftly spread towards the top of the crystal pillar. The ground beside the crystal pillar suddenly exploded. Another huge black object broke out of the ground and reached high into the air. It stopped just before it touched the energy barrier. Then, Yin Nuashing saw the straight black object suddenly bend from the middle and fall downwards. He tightened his grip on the Netherworld Ruins sword. Boom! However, after a moment, he took a step back because he saw that the bent front end did not extend towards him. Instead, it landed heavily on the ground. The huge weight caused cracks to appear on the ground. Waves of dust scattered in all directions, causing Lin Sheng and the others to be thrown 10 feet into the air from the ground. What is that? Chuan Mu hurriedly supported the people beside him. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the two unknown objects that had emerged from the ground. He could only instinctively feel that these things were extremely dangerous. If they casually emitted some of their aura, not many of them will be left alive. Yin Nuashing did not speak. His colorful eyes stared intently at the back of the crystal pillar. The ground there had also protruded high, and a pile of soil and rocks had fallen down. However, a moment later, two huge and bright scarlet objects rose from the ground in the distance, causing him to be stunned for a moment. His face was filled with astonishment. After calming himself down, Yin Nuashing saw that the two huge scarlet moons were rising higher and higher. In the end, they stopped when they were still a distance away from the top of the energy shield. At the top of the moon was a black thing. From the looks of it, it was a huge head, and the two red moons were eyes. It's a puppet. However, it's so big. Yin Nuashing thought for a moment and came to a realization. The two huge objects that were bent and pressed against the ground, in addition to the two arms that he had just chopped off with his sword. However, the energy barrier here was tens of thousands of feet high. This puppet must have been buried underground. At this moment, only the part above the chest and one arm was exposed. The rest seemed to be buried below. However, if the part above the chest was already so big, how big would the entire thing be? Chapter 682. The black puppet only revealed its shoulders and upper body. Its huge size shocked Lin Sheng and the others, especially when the terrifying aura spread out, causing them to feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. Yin Nuashing clenched the Netherworld Ruins sword in his hand and took a few steps back. His attack range included Xian, Ding Mingyu, and the others as he stared vigilantly at the huge black crystal pillar. Crack! Just as his vigilant gaze looked over, the cracks that had spread out on the black crystal pillar instantly spread from the bottom to the top. The entire crystal pillar was covered with spiderweb-like cracks, causing Yin Nuashing's pupils to shrink slightly. A clear shattering sound also softly sounded in his ears. Subsequently, the 100,000 feet tall crystal pillar suddenly exploded. The moment the crystal pillar exploded, Yin Nuashing took out the divine light mirror. Just as he was about to defend himself, he was stunned. This was because nothing special happened after the crystal pillar exploded. The gray-robed youth in the crystal seemed to have broken free from his shackles and slowly floated down from the crystal pillar. The black aura circling around him made him look extremely terrifying, like a great demon. It's just a spiritual body. His real body died long ago. Yishi turned her large eyes and saw the vigilance on Yin Nuashing's face. She could not help but laugh faintly. Her small hand tugged at his sleeve, causing him to be slightly startled. Then, he smiled and shook his head. He did not let down his guard because of her words. The gray-robed youth slowly floated down from the sky. The black aura around his body also slowly retracted. When he landed on the ground, the black aura had completely retracted into his body. He lifted his head, and a black light flashed in his black eyes. Then, those eyes that seemed to have died slowly came back to life and gained some vigor. Intruders! Why did you disturb my sleep? The gray-clothed young man lifted his head. His eyes swept over Yin Nuashing and the rest, after which he slowly opened his mouth. That voice seemed to have resounded from this black basin. It directly penetrated one's ears and reached the depths of one's mind, causing the expressions of Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the rest to tremble slightly. Yin Nuashing also heard this voice. His eyes narrowed slightly. However, before he could say anything, Yishi jumped up. Her small mouth twitched as she sneered. You're just a remnant soul that has been dead for countless years. You can't even leave the range of this energy barrier. You have less than 10% of your remaining strength. You don't have much time left. Can you please stop acting mysterious? Yin Nuashing and the others blushed with shame. The former hurriedly picked Yi Shi up and hugged her. Then, he cupped his hands together and laughed bitterly at the gray-robed youth, who was stunned by Yi Shi's words. The gray-robed youth was stunned for a long time. A moment later, he suddenly lowered his head. His entire body trembled slightly, causing Yin Nuashing to be slightly shocked. Just when he thought that the former was about to attack, the gray-robed youth suddenly laughed towards the sky. Ha ha! Indeed, indeed. This old man has been dead for a few eras. The last remnant soul that I left behind is sealed in this soul-sealing sky region. Moreover, it is fake. I don't have much time left. The gray-robed youth covered his head with his right hand and laughed loudly. His laughter was inexplicable and even a little crazy. This caused Yin Nuashing and the others to look at each other. They did not understand what was going on. All right. Let's cut the crap. After laughing for a long time, the gray-robed youth slowly stopped. He placed his left hand on his waist and assumed a very casual posture. Then he laughed and said, "This old man is the owner of this maze world. Long story short, this maze has a total of 20 levels. The world that you are in right now is a self-created world that I created. Only by deciphering this self-created world can one proceed to the 20th level. Without deciphering it, no one can leave." Upon hearing this, Yin Nuashing frowned slightly. Just as he was about to speak, the gray-robed youth stretched out his hand to stop him. Then, he continued, "The 20th level hides the greatest secret of the entire God realm. You don't have to say anything righteous. Since the maze was created, many people have made it to the 19th level. However, no one has ever been able to leave this place. All of them have been trapped in the 19th level. How can one not pay a price if they want to know such a secret? I have already explained this matter very clearly in the central hall of the 14th level. It is the fault of greedy people. Don't blame me." Yin Nuashing was rendered speechless by his words. He nodded helplessly. What he said was true. It was true that everyone came here voluntarily. No one forced them. However, since I have also awakened, the door to the 20th level should be opening soon. I just don't know if anyone will be able to make it in this time. However, I don't think so. Ha. The 20th level was originally a trap. The 19th level is a killing zone in front of the trap. Suddenly, the gray-robed youth laughed loudly. His words stunned Yin Nuashing and the others. They frowned deeply. So the 19th level was used to trap people? After laughing for a while, the gray-robed youth lowered his head. When he saw the expressions of Yin Nuashing and the others, he chuckled again. "Kid, don't make that kind of expression. The 20th level does indeed hide the secret of the God realm. However, do you think that this secret is something that anyone can see? Not to mention that the ants on the 19th level can't see it. Even this old man might not be qualified to know such a secret when I was at my peak. It was all a coincidence that I was able to see such a secret." Hearing this, Yin Nuashing was a little puzzled. He used the word see. Although he didn't know how powerful the master of the maze was when he was alive, Yishi said that he might be an expert at the level of a demigod master. Then, he must be in existence at the level of a peak god emperor. He might be even stronger. If even such an expert used the word see, what level of secret could it be? Could it be a secret at the level of a god? The gray-robed youth was stunned. He seemed to feel that he had said too much. He coughed dryly and waved his hand. The black basin suddenly trembled. At the center of the black basin, a huge platform suddenly rushed out from the ground. At the center of the black platform, there was a golden staircase. Each step was more than a foot high. There were a total of 33 steps. A strange fluctuation was emitted from it, causing Yishi's expression to freeze slightly. "Cough, it's rare to see people. I'm being long-winded. Now, let's get to the main topic." The gray-robed youth coughed dryly and waved his sleeve lightly. He pointed at the black platform and said softly, This is the condensing spirit platform. I don't know if you've heard of the spirit marrow. Yin Nuashing and the others looked at each other, then shook their heads lightly. Yishi raised her head and said softly in a tender voice, "The liquid sealed in the body of a god expert, condensed by condensing the essence of his entire body, is more pure than his own energy. That is the spirit marrow. However, the liquid condensed by an ordinary god can only be called the sacred marrow. Only the liquid condensed by an emperor god can be called the spirit marrow. The sacred marrow and the spirit marrow can only be condensed by god experts. Just one drop can turn an ordinary person into a genius respected by thousands. It has a very good effect on divinity and one's own aptitude. It can also speed up the cultivation of a god expert," Yishi said softly. Then, she rolled up her wide sleeves, revealing a slender arm. She stretched it out in front of Yin Nuashing and slightly trembled. Then, under that slender arm, a ray of golden light appeared. It was like a golden liquid that filled the blood vessels, containing a terrifying amount of energy. "If Brother Nua needs it, I can condense it for you. However, I haven't broken through to the Emperor God level yet. What I condensed is only the sacred marrow. When I go back, I'll try to break through to the Emperor God level. When the time comes, I'll condense the spirit marrow for Brother Noah to drink like water." Yishi giggled, revealing her pearl-like white teeth. Yin Nuashing smiled and didn't say anything. He just reached out and rubbed Yishi's little head. Ding Mengyu, Lin Sheng, and the others, who were listening at the side, felt their cheeks twitch slightly. Although they didn't know exactly how precious the so-called sacred marrow and the spirit marrow were, from the effect and the fact that only God experts could condense it, it should be very precious. However, in the next second, Yishi said that the sacred marrow could be condensed to the point that Yin Nuashing could drink it like water. This was a person with a background, that's right. The condensation of the sacred marrow and the spirit marrow requires a large amount of the god's power. The gray-robed youth smiled and nodded. Then, he reached out and pointed at the black high platform. He said softly, "The 33 sacred steps are used to test the aptitude of the disciples in the sect. You can try to climb up. Whichever step you reach, you'll get the corresponding reward. If someone can reach the top, we'll talk about it after you reach the top. However, I can reveal something else. Reaching the top is equivalent to holding the key to the 20th level. It's only the key. The door hasn't appeared yet." Upon hearing this, Yin Nuashing curled his lips. His gaze seemed to penetrate the energy shield of the black talisman and see the crystal pillar plane on the distant horizon. "Sensitive brat." The gray-robed youth smiled and didn't deny it. He nodded casually and said, "Anyway, you can try it first. I think this is very attractive to you. Treat it as an extra reward for breaking through here. As for whether you can see what's on the 20th level, it'll depend on your luck." Upon hearing this, Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, and the others grinned. Upon hearing the so-called effect of the spirit marrow, they were very tempted. It could increase one's aptitude. There weren't many things in the world that had such a miraculous effect, right? "Brother Nua, you guys go ahead. Little she doesn't need these now. The spirit marrow will be the most effective for you guys." Upon hearing this, Yishi grinned and slowly climbed down from Yin Nuashing's body. She looked up and grinned. "Anyway, we're here to get out. Since this is the key, let's take it first. When the door appears, we won't be flustered." Yin Nuashing also smiled and nodded. Then, he turned his head to look at Ding Mengyu, Lin Sheng, and the others and nodded. Upon hearing this, Lin Sheng and the others smiled. Then, they moved and appeared in front of the golden staircase. They stood side by side. Yin Nuashing and the others took a deep breath. Then, they gently lifted their feet and landed on the golden staircase. Dong! As soon as they stepped on the first step, Yin Nuashing and the others heard a deep sound. This sound seemed to come from an ancient era. It carried an indelible sharpness that penetrated the river of time and reached Yin Nuashing and the others' ears. When Yin Nuashing and the others heard this sound, they calmed down and didn't feel anything strange. They looked at each other and nodded. Then, they lifted their feet in unison and took the second step. Dong! As the second step fell, the sound rang out again. This time, the sound was even clearer. It sounded like the resonance of bells and drums, as if a grand piece of music was being played. The third step, the fourth step, the group walked up the golden staircase. The resonance of the bells and drums became clearer and clearer. It continued to resonate and resonate in their souls, causing their souls to tremble. As the sound resounded in their souls, they seemed to see a grand expedition. The bells and drums sounded together, and the flags fluttered in the wind. Their aura swallowed thousands of miles like a tiger. Even the galaxy trembled under this aura. Yinuashing frowned slightly. After a while, she relaxed again. The group walked up the golden steps and slowly came to the 23rd step. There was a slightly longer buffer platform here. Yinuashing and the others raised their heads and saw that at the top of the steps, at the end of the golden steps, there was a golden platform. On the platform, there was a statue that looked like a star field. There were many stars in the statue that looked like a star field. There was also an unusually bright galaxy that was suffused with an ancient aura. It felt like a prehistoric era was pressing down on them. The oppressive feeling caused the expressions of Lin Sheng and the others to change. Reaching the 23rd step was already so terrifying. How terrifying would the last 10 steps be in addition to the oppressive feeling of the statue? That kind of terrifying pressure seemed to have caused the space to freeze. The last 10 steps of the Saint Steps are where the essence lies. However, the fact that you can reach this step is enough to show that you are all geniuses. Give you some time, and there will be a place for you in the divine world. The gray-clothed youth appeared beside them unknowingly. He smiled at the group, then raised his head to look at the star-field statue at the top. He said softly, "The last 10 steps contain a mysterious power. It contains the power of the gods. As for whether you can reach it or not, it depends on your awareness." The corners of Yin Nuashing and the other's eyes twitched. This bastard must have done on purpose. He waited until now to say it. The pressure here is already very terrifying. For the rest of the path, do what you can and do. Ding Mingyu's pretty face was solemn. She could not help but frown because she also felt that the pressure here was extremely terrifying. She felt that as long as she stepped on the last 10 steps, the sound of the bells and the pressure of the star field would flood over. Lin Sheng and the others nodded. The last 10 steps were not as easy to reach as they had imagined. Chapter 683. Below the black stone platform, the young man in gray stood in front of the golden steps. He looked at Yin Nuashing and the others as a sinister smile appeared on his face. Yishi frowned when she saw him like this. She jumped down from the stone platform and held a terrifying power in her hand. She said, "You didn't do anything to it, did you?" The young man in gray could not help but laugh out loud when he saw her looking at him warily, like she was protecting a child. He shook his head and said, "No, the Saint Steps are indeed used to test one's aptitude. The last 10 steps can't be taken just because one wants to, because once one reaches the top, it proves that one can reach that level. Of course, it only proves that one has the aptitude to reach that level. As an underworld emperor, you should know that the world is unpredictable. Having aptitude doesn't mean that one can definitely reach that level. Not being able to reach that level doesn't mean that one can't reach that level either." The young man in gray laughed. Yishi dispersed the power in her hand suspiciously when she heard that. She raised her head and looked at Yin Nuashing's back. She smiled gently, but did not say anything. "Ah, I forgot to tell you that no one has ever reached the top of the steps." Just as everyone was about to step onto the steps, the young man in gray's teasing voice rang out in their ears again. Yin Nuashing and the others' faces darkened. "Can you not say this every time you're in an emergency? Brother Yin, what do you think?" Suddenly, Lin Sheng turned his head and looked at Yin Nuashing with a smile. "I can't bear to watch. If no one has ever reached the top, then we'll just break the record. The question is, do you want to do it or not?" Yin Nuashing raised his head. Then he turned around and glanced at Lin Sheng and the others. He smiled evilly. Everyone rolled their eyes at that moment. He also smiled faintly and said, "As long as you want to, you can reach the top. The moment he finished speaking, Yin Nuoxing suddenly raised his foot and stepped onto the first step of the 10 steps. Boom! The moment Yin Nuoxing stepped onto the saint's staircase, a vast power suddenly erupted from the void. It was as if a god had punched out from the void, and a thunderous explosion rang out. Immediately afterwards, a terrifying pressure surged over. Yin Nuoxing's expression changed slightly. He stomped his feet on the stairs and forcefully resisted the force. He lowered his head and saw that there was a fist mark on his clothes. It was as if someone had really thrown a punch at him. Yin Nuoxing looked at the fist mark on his abdomen. His eyes flickered. He turned around and looked at Xian, Little Moon, and Yuer. Before he could say anything, Xian reached out and sealed his lips with her slender fingers. Then she smiled sweetly at him. Little Moon also giggled. She held Yuer's hand and jumped onto the saint's staircase. Little Yu and Little Yu had just stepped onto the saint's stairs when their delicate bodies suddenly trembled. The earth-shattering impact that Yin Nuoxing had just faced also descended on their bodies at this moment. However, they clenched their silver teeth tightly and forcefully withstood it. Xian followed behind them slowly. She did not have it as difficult as Little Moon and Little Moon, but her steps were also extremely heavy. After stepping onto the first step, her delicate body trembled slightly. Clearly, she was also under the same pressure. Seeing this, Lin Sheng also roared fiercely. Then, he stepped onto the saint's staircase. Ding Mingyu and the rest also followed unyieldingly. Yin Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that everyone had caught up. His eyes looked to the front and solemnly looked at the top. His body paused for a moment before he took another step forward. With every step he took, the sound of the bell and drum in his mind would reverberate. Accompanying the reverberation was the sound of a powerful fighting spirit clashing. The sound of blades and swords clashing and oars churning was as though he was listening to an earth-shattering great battle. With every step he took, this sound would increase in intensity, piercing their souls, causing his expression to become increasingly solemn and his eyebrows to furrow. Crack! When he stepped onto the fourth step, Yin Nuoxing's body trembled violently. The sound of the battle that reverberated in his mind had completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by the sound of flowing water. At this moment, he could clearly feel that the reddish-gold blood in his body was flowing at a much faster speed. What he heard was the sound of the blood flowing in his body. Furthermore, the pressure had become even stronger. It was not only suppressing his body, but also his blood vessels. After wiping a drop of sweat from his forehead, Yin Nuoxing turned his head. However, he saw that everyone was already sweating profusely. However, they were still resolutely taking step after step. This caused him to sigh softly. He glanced at Xian, who was relatively calmer, and softly said, "Be careful." Behind him, Little Moon and Yuer were also struggling. Every step they took caused their petite bodies to tremble violently. Yin Nuoxing's colorful eyes stared intently at them. However, he had no intention of stopping them. This was because he could see the determination on their faces. Just like Xian, they probably did not want him to ask them to give up. He turned his head to look ahead. When someone else stepped onto the fourth step, Yin Nuoxing also turned his head to take a look. He was slightly surprised. This was because the first to chase after him was actually Xian and Jun Luo. Following them were Ding Mingyu, Lin Ran, Chuan Mu, and Zhong Songling. As Lin Sheng's strength was slightly lower, the pressure here was already extremely terrifying for him. One could even see that his clothes were beginning to tear and bright red blood was seeping out of his body. After waiting for a moment, Yin Nuoxing slowly took a step towards the fifth step. Then, his pupils constricted slightly. An earth-shattering pressure emanated from his body, causing his tall and straight figure to bend abruptly. He directly knelt down on one knee. Yin Nuoxing was shocked to discover that at this moment, his bones were frantically vibrating. Streams of strange energy were being emitted from all parts of his body. This energy caused him to lose control of his body for a moment. Only then did he kneel down on one knee. However, after a moment, he slowly stood up. The moment the crowd on the fourth step saw Yin Nuashing suddenly kneel down, their breathing stagnated. However, when they saw that he quickly stood up, they heaved a sigh of relief. They looked at each other, and Lin Sheng suddenly shouted. He staggered forward and stopped at the fifth step. When he reached this step, he suddenly bent his legs and knelt down. All the bones in his body were wailing miserably. It was as if the pressure would destroy him from the inside if he took another step forward. Ding Mingyu followed closely behind. Fine beads of sweat appeared between her fair brows. Even though she was powerful, she could not ignore the pressure here. When she stepped onto the fifth step, her delicate body also knelt down forcefully. The pain of her knees landing on the ground made her groan. However, she was quickly helped up by a slender hand. When she turned her head, she was surprised to see that it was Yin Nuashing. At this moment, the latter's forehead was beginning to sweat. You guys still want to continue? Ding Mingyu gritted her teeth fiercely. She looked at Yin Nuashing, who did not have much of a reaction, and then looked at Lin Sheng, who was beginning to bleed. Lin Sheng didn't say anything and just nodded heavily. There was no sign of retreat in his black eyes. In the next moment, he glanced at Yin Nuashing, took a deep breath, and suddenly took a step towards the sixth step. Boom! Lin Sheng's body trembled violently. His black eyes dimmed slightly. Then, he roared at the sky, as if he was roaring angrily from the bottom of his heart. A force seemed to surge out of his body in response to his roar. His other foot suddenly pressed down on the sixth step. That roar shook the hearts of Chuan Mu and the rest violently. When Yin Nuashing saw this, he sighed. He glanced at Xian, who had also come to his side. He gently rubbed her head with his palm and smiled gently. Then he suddenly lifted his foot and stepped onto the sixth step. When Ding Mingyu and the rest saw this, they also turned their gazes. When they saw that he was standing straight on the sixth step without much of a reaction, they could not help but be stunned. Could it be that the sixth step had become easier? Stay true to your heart. Yin Nuashing looked back at Ding Mingyu and Xian and said softly. The sixth step was trying to shake his will. Unfortunately, he only had his obsession. Without his will, it was useless no matter how it tried to shake him. Lin Sheng stuck out his tongue and licked the blood at the corner of his mouth. He also suddenly lifted his foot and stepped onto the seventh step. Puffed. A large mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth. Streaks of blood savagely exploded on the skin under his clothes. Blood gushed out like it was free of charge, swiftly dyeing his clothes red, turning him into a bloody person. Ding Mingyu and the rest were shocked when they saw this. Was there a need to risk his life like this? At this moment, Lin Sheng's body was already covered in blood. The terrifying pressure surging from the surroundings almost squeezed his body alive. The seventh step made his soul tremble violently. The sound of blood flowing, the sound of his heartbeat, and the sound of his soul trembling constantly reverberated in his ears. It made him feel as if his ears were about to go deaf. Lin Sheng's body was on the verge of collapse as he stood on the seventh step. It was as if a gust of wind could blow him away. Yin Nuashing was also standing on the seventh step. However, his condition was clearly much better than the former's. Waves of buzzing sounds came from his body as he resisted the monstrous pressure. Yin Nuashing's colorful eyes looked at the top. He finally knew why no one could reach the top. Because according to his guess, even if it was him, he would probably reach his limit after reaching the ninth step. He would have to risk his life for the 10th step. The fourth step stirred his blood. The fifth step shook his bones. The sixth step shook his will. And the seventh step stirred his soul. What about the eighth step? What about the ninth step? Even he felt a strong, tearing sensation coming from his body. He turned around and glanced behind him. Little Moon and Ewer had both sat down cross-legged on the sixth step. Obviously, they already knew that this was their limit. If they went any higher, then they wouldn't be able to endure it. Little Moon and Ewer raised their heads and looked at Yin Nuashing. A smile flashed across their sweaty faces. Their Mei Mao eyes were filled with encouragement. They wanted to cheer him on and the legend in their hearts. Seeing the smiles on the two girls' faces, Yin Nuashing smiled and nodded. He turned his head. Xian, Ding Mingyu, and the rest had all reached the seventh step. Everyone looked at Lin Shang with complicated expressions. Don't continue. Ding Mingyu wiped the sweat off her forehead. She stared at Lin Shang, who was almost covered in blood. Her red lips parted slightly. You go up first. His body seemed to be covered in a blood armor. His voice also became extremely hoarse, as if even his vocal cord were covered in blood. Ding Mingyu nodded. Then, she gritted her teeth and lifted her feet. Demonic chi surrounded her body and resisted the terrifying pressure. Just as she was about to take a step forward, a black sleeve reached over and blocked her. She was slightly stunned. Then, she saw Yun Nuoxing striding toward the 8th step. Roar! A violent roar reverberated in Yun Nuoxing's mind. It was like the roar of a god, causing his face to turn slightly pale. Endless golden light pressed down on him like a mountain, causing Yun Nuoxing to roar fiercely. At that moment, the sound of the guqin drifted. Endless starlight scattered in all directions. His star power was released wildly, causing the scene above his head to turn into a starfield. That gorgeous scene caused the expressions of the people behind him to change slightly. Ever since he stepped onto the 33 Tribulations sacred stairs, they had not seen Yun Nuoxing move at all. At this moment, the 8th step forced him to use all his strength. The pressure of a god. Yun Nuoxing gritted his teeth and said these 4 words with difficulty. Everyone's expressions changed slightly. The pressure of a god. These 4 simple words were like a mountain pressing down on everyone, causing their expressions to become extremely solemn. Chapter 684. The ancient zither music was accompanied by a roar that seemed to come from a prehistoric world as it reverberated in everyone's minds, causing Ding Mingyu and the rest to let out a soft groan. An extremely terrifying pressure enveloped the staircase, crazily attacking their bodies and souls. The moment Yun Nuoxing reached the 8th step, an ancient roar seemed to resound in their minds, causing everyone's expressions to change slightly. That majestic roar caused Lin Shang to raise his head with great difficulty. His vision was blurry as he looked at the top of the saint's staircase. At that spot, a star-like statue was emitting a terrifying pressure. That kind of pressure was only born for destruction and was enough to cause one to collapse. What stood in front of him was like an insurmountable mountain. He could feel that once he stepped onto the 8th step, his body might crumble. On the 9th step, his body and soul would not be able to withstand it and would explode. In his blurry vision, Lin Shang stared straight at the back of the rainbow-haired figure. When he saw that the figure was still standing proudly, his heart jumped slightly. He did not know when it started, but he liked to compare himself with the figure. The more he compared himself, the more he felt that there was an insurmountable gap between them. His mind flickered absent-mindedly as a beautiful figure seemed to appear. 2 figures towered in front of him, as if they were extending their hands to him, causing him to suddenly wake up from his dazed state. The hesitation in his eyes completely disappeared. He still had things to do. Suddenly, a low roar that sounded like that of a wild beast rang out. It shocked Yun Nuoxing, who was in front, and Ding Mingyu and the rest who were at the side. They turned their gazes and looked to the side in shock. Over there, the figure who was originally like a small boat in the sea, swaying like a small tree on a mountain peak, and was about to fall suddenly erupted with an awe-inspiring aura. That long roar towards the sky seemed to have bestowed him with endless power. Then he suddenly took a step forward and reached the 8th step in 1 step. Roar! An ancient and majestic roar resounded through the clouds. This time, everyone heard it very clearly. However, they were somewhat stunned because this roar was not as intimidating as when Yun Nuoxing had reached the 8th step. That was to say, the roar caused by Lin Shang was far less terrifying than the one caused by Yun Nuoxing. Even so, this roar still wanted to completely destroy Lin Shang. Intense pain spread throughout his entire body, almost tearing his rationality apart. However, he took another step forward amidst the power of the crazy roar. Ding Mingyu and Mei Mao widened their eyes. Even Yun Nuoxing watched anxiously as he stepped onto the ninth step. Bang! There was a sound like a balloon exploding. Lin Sheng's body stood on the ninth step. Then, Yun Nuoxing and the rest's expressions changed. They saw a bloody mist of blood from Lin Sheng's bodies. It was as if a bomb was exploding from within his body to explode his flesh and blood. Lin Sheng. Yun Nuoxing's expression changed drastically. He suddenly stepped onto the ninth step. Then, his expression suddenly froze. It was as if his soul had been pierced by an arrow. An unstoppable pressure eroded towards him, causing him to spit out a large mouthful of blood. His body exploded like a balloon filled with air, exploding into a bloody mist. That stubborn figure finally knelt down under the horrified gazes of Zian and the rest. Blood gushed out from his eyes and mouth. Before his kneeling figure could stabilize, Yun Nuoxing spat out another mouthful of blood. Even with his strong body, cracks appeared on his body at this moment. It was as if he was about to be torn apart. Blood gushed out. The reddish-gold blood dyed him extremely hideous as it flowed down the holy steps. Little Star, Mr. Yun, Ziyin, and Jun Luo cried out in panic at the same time. As the saying goes, being too concerned makes one confused. The two women forgot about their surroundings at the moment. They actually took a step forward and stepped onto the eighth step. Sigh. A terrifying sigh seemed to have penetrated from a distant era. It was like the sigh of a god that directly shook the entire world, causing the expressions of Ding Mingyu and the rest to change slightly. They hurriedly stabilized their souls, and only then were they not affected by it. Don't come up. When Yun Nuoxing heard this sigh, he was suddenly startled. He turned around and saw Zian and Jun Luo stumbling to a stop on the eighth step. A mouthful of blood spurted out of their red mouths. Their beautiful faces were slightly pale, and their long skirts fluttered in the wind. It was a very poignant sight. Just as Yun Nuoxing roared this sentence, he spat out another mouthful of blood. He did not have time to cover this mouthful of blood, and it directly sprayed onto Zian's delicate face. The warm touch caused the latter's delicate body to tremble violently. Her jade-like hand trembled as she wiped the warm, golden-red blood on the right side of her face. Looking at the blood that was still warm on her jade-like finger, she gently placed it in her mouth and licked it under Yun Nuoxing's astonished gaze. Then she smiled sweetly and said, "Little Star's blood is really fragrant." Yun Nuoxing's beautiful face darkened slightly. He hurriedly covered his mouth with his palm and violently coughed out another mouthful of blood. At this moment, he also seemed to be covered in blood. Moreover, it seemed that because of his strength, his situation was even worse than Lin Sheng's. After taking a long breath, Yun Nuoxing wiped the blood from his eyes and said rather weakly, "Listen carefully, the eighth and ninth steps are all due to personal factors. I felt the pressure of a deity on the eighth step, but Lin Sheng only felt the pressure of a deity. Luo, and Nizi, you guys came up together and heard the sigh of a deity. I reckon that if you come up together, the pressure will stack. The ninth step will definitely tear your body apart." When Ding Mingyu, Chuan Mu, and the rest heard this, they were slightly shocked. The ninth step would definitely tear the body apart. Then, wouldn't the 10th step cause the body to explode? No wonder no one dared to step into the last step. The pressure there was enough to make everyone collapse. When Yun Nuoxing spoke, his entire body was pressed down very low, almost crawling on the ground. At this moment, he stretched out his trembling hand and touched Lin Sheng's body, which was still warm. Then, he hurriedly took a breath and said softly, "He's fine. He's not dead. He just fainted." Bang! Bang! Just as he finished speaking, he heard 2 more explosions, causing him to be shocked. He abruptly raised his head, only to see a bloody mist explode. 2 figures slowly fell to the ground, causing him to ignore the intense pain in his body and hurriedly reach out to catch the 2 figures. Instead of saying that he reached out to catch them, it was more accurate to say that he opened his chest and let the 2 of them use him as a pillow. When the light weight pressed down on him, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He He was in so much pain that he clenched his teeth and sucked in a breath of cold air. A tearing pain came from his chest. After panting for a moment, Yin Nuoxing lowered his head and laughed bitterly. As expected, he saw Jun, Luo, Yi, and Zian. At this moment, the two of them were also pale. Streams of blood flowed down their delicate bodies, causing the situation on the ninth step to become extremely tragic. 4 blood-stained bodies lay neatly on the ninth step. When Ding Mengyu and the rest saw that Yin Nuoxing and the other 3 were risking their lives, their expressions were somewhat complicated. Then, they exchanged glances with Chuan Mu and the rest, and suddenly took a step forward. The 4 of them simultaneously stepped onto the 8th step. Sigh. Another sigh filled the sky. This was the sigh of a deity caused by the 4 of them. It was as if it wanted to lead everyone back to the ancient era. It made Ding Mingyu and the rest feel insignificant and hopeless. This sigh made them slightly absent-minded. It was as if they were in a sealed space. Their blood, souls, and wills were roaring wildly, trying to break free from the shackles. Ding Mingyu, Chuan Mu, and the rest all spat out a mouthful of blood. Their faces were slightly pale, but they stood firm and did not fall. They saw the 4 people in front of them lying miserably on the ground. Those were their juniors. They had already stepped onto the despairing 9th step. How could they fall here? Ah, I'm going all out. Chuan Mu roared violently. Then he took a step forward with his thick legs and stepped onto the 9th step. Bang! As expected, the sound of a body exploding caused Yin Nuoxing's heart to tremble. He opened his eyes with great difficulty, only to see Chuan Mu's enormous body violently collapse on the stairs. Immediately after, Lin Kuei roared towards the sky as he collapsed on the 9th step. Ah! Zhong Songling and Ding Mingyu also cried out. The 2 of them lifted their feet and took a step forward in unison. 2 explosions resounded, and 2 clouds of blood spread out. Then, the 2 of them fell. Yin Nuoxing looked at himself and stretched out his right hand with great difficulty, trying to catch Ding Mingyu. However, that arm that could pull up a mountain could not even catch the latter's delicate body. When he touched her, a sharp pain came from his arm, as if his bones and muscles had been shattered. This caused him to fiercely suck in a breath of cold air, but he still clenched his teeth and slowed down the speed of her fall. At the bottom of the sacred stairs, the gray-clothed youth looked at Yin Nuoxing and the rest in a tragic state. His face could not help but twitch. Yishi looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was lying in a pool of blood. Her big wine-red eyes were filled with heartache. Her small hands tightly gripped her wide sleeves, and her silver teeth bit her red lips. She was so nervous that she held her breath. Every little one is so dazzling. I really like them. After a long while, the gray-clothed youth laughed bitterly. These little ones knew that their bodies would explode when they stepped on the 9th step. There were already 2 precedents, but they still did it. Ding Mingyu and the rest only climbed the 9th step because they saw their juniors risking their lives. They were really risking their lives to accompany them. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh. His beautiful face was pale and bloodless. His body had already collapsed, and his bones were covered with cracks. His blood was surging wildly, and his soul was about to be destroyed. He could really feel that he was only a fine line away from death. The 2 sighs of the gods also affected him, making him even weaker. At this moment, it seemed like a long time had passed. Time and space were still, and it was very quiet. After a long time, Yin Nuoxing said weakly, "Hey, is anyone still alive?" Barely. No, I think I'm already dead." The first thing he heard was the extremely weak voices of Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, and the others. After lying down for a long time, Lin Sheng also woke up weakly. The blood of the 8 people was mixed together, and it was impossible to tell who it was. Only the golden and red blood was very eye-catching. Yin Nuoxing smiled weakly. Lying in his arms, the 3 girls who were using his arms as pillows also nodded lightly. It seemed like they didn't have the strength to move anymore. The 8 people lying on the steps were covered in blood, and no one wanted to move. After lying down for a while, Yin Nuoxing realized that his recovery rate was very low. It should be because of the suppression of the saint's stairs. Lass, move aside a little. There's still one more step. Yin Nuoxing struggled to slowly move Jun Luo, Yi, and Xian's heads aside and gently place them to the side. Then his body trembled slightly as he slowly stood up. Although he was swaying, and although blood was flowing nonstop, and he had lost more than half of his blood, and an ordinary person would have died long ago, he still stood up shakily. Stars, don't go up. You'll die, Lin Sheng panted hurriedly. He also wanted to turn around, but the intense pain from his entire body drowned out his rationality, making him unable to move. It was as if even his meridians had been cut off. He could only weakly say, even if you want to risk your life, there's a limit. Brother Yun, if you go up again, you'll really die. I told you, records are meant to be broken. It's just a matter of whether you want to or not. If you want it, then you have to pay the corresponding price. Die. If I die, then I die. Yin Nuoxing grinned bitterly. His beautiful face had long lost all color and was as white as gold paper. Boom! What followed after his voice sounded was a terrifying explosion that caused the hearts of Ziyin and the others to tremble violently. Dense shock surged out from the bottom of their hearts. They couldn't care about the intense pain on their bodies as they forcefully endured the pain and raised their heads before flipping over. On the platform at the top of the saint's stairs, golden and red blood spread out like a spray, causing everyone's gaze to freeze at this moment. Brother Yun, little junior, no one would have thought that Yin Nuoxing's courage had reached such an extent. No, that wasn't courage. That was something that could only be done when one had long abandoned life and death. Amidst the shocked cries of Ding Mingyu and the others, the colorful hare's body also lost all strength and slowly fell forward. Little star? Xian screamed in despair. Her jade-like hands supported her body with all her strength. Streaks of bright red blood dyed her purple dress red, and her beautiful dark purple hair was dyed bright red. Her dark purple eyes were filled with despair, and a trace of sparkling and translucent tears fell from them. Everyone looked at this scene in shock. Then, they saw an even more shocking scene. The girl in the purple dress, who had already fallen down, suddenly had so much strength that they did not know where she got it from. She stood up straight from the 9th step. Before she could stand firm, her body had already rushed up to the 10th step and caught the falling body. Pucci, a large mouthful of blood spurted out from Xian's throat. Her eyes gradually lost focus, but she didn't seem to feel much pain. Looking at the youth in her arms with absent-minded eyes, Mei Mao couldn't hide the love and relief in her eyes. Even though both of them were badly mutilated, even though their bodies were soaked in blood, even though their bodies were intertwined with each other, even though their bones were clearly visible, and even though their bodies were about to explode, she was very happy. At this moment, she actually fell on the 10th step with him. Ding Mingyu and the others struggled to sit cross-legged under the sculpture. Their eyes were filled with complex emotions. They could feel that whoever stepped on the 10th step would die. Therefore, no one dared to step on it. However, this time, it was stepped on by two people who didn't care about their lives. The 10th step seemed to have the resolve to throw away one's life. When the gray-robed youth saw that the 10 of them were close to the sculpture, he smiled slightly. His smile was very strange, and there was a hint of mockery and ridicule in it. This was especially so when he looked at Yin Nuoxing, as if he was looking at something funny. With a gentle wave of his hand, 10 rays of silver light fell from the huge sculpture and landed on Yin Nuoxing, Lin Sheng, and the others. The silver light was like the starlight in the star domain. The slender silver light was a drop of liquid. Those were the divine marrow that the gray-robed youth had mentioned. The appearance of the divine marrow was related to the aura of the person who condensed it. Clearly, the aura of the owner of the divine marrow was related to the star domain. However, compared to Yin Nuoxing's star domain, the divine marrow seemed to be thinner. Silver white divine marrow whizzed down from the star domain sculpture. It was like a storm, cleansing the almost destroyed bodies of Yin Nuashing and the others. Layers of silver light fell continuously and covered the bodies of Yin Nuashing and the others. Gradually, the 10 of them were enveloped. Looking from a distance, it was as though 10 silver-white light cocoons had appeared under the star region sculpture. The excessively dense energy caused Yishi, who had appeared by the side, to twitch her small nose, causing some surprise to appear in her wine-red eyes. "Hey, you weren't a post-god level expert when you were alive, were you? The density of this divine marrow isn't something that a god emperor can condense." Yishi looked suspiciously at the 10 descending silvery white light pillars. The density of the energy was frightening. "Didn't you say that I was a demigod master?" The gray-robed youth smiled faintly. His words made Yishi's eyes narrow slightly. It seemed that the gray-robed youth had been monitoring them when they entered the energy barrier. "Oh, then you were close to becoming a post-god level expert." How could Yishi not understand when she heard that? The gray-robed youth was definitely someone who was infinitely close to becoming a post-god level expert when he was alive. The gray-robed youth smiled faintly and didn't comment. Yishi understood even more when she saw his expression. She couldn't help but sigh. Then she moved her little feet and walked to the light cocoon formed by Yin Nuashing. She gently knelt down and closed her eyes to wait for the latter to wake up. Yin Nuashing slowly woke up from her daze and opened her eyes. However, she was stunned when she opened her eyes. What she saw in front of her wasn't the black basin, but a vast expanse of green land. A dream? No, this is a memory projection. Yin Nuashing was stunned for a while. Then, she seemed to understand something. She turned her gaze and looked at the green plain. She stepped on it lightly. Even the grassland felt very real. After a while, she raised her head and saw that there were countless figures floating in the sky. The auras of the hundreds of thousands of figures were very powerful. They seemed to be high-level gods. Their auras made the heavens and the earth tremble. And in front of this army of gods, there was a shroud of black fog that billowed with demonic aura. Behind this army, there was a black land, a fiery red sky, black clouds, and a shattered land. This was the demon world. Yin Nuashing's pupil shrank. Although he hadn't seen the demon world, he had heard you describe the demon world. He could still vaguely recognize the red and black land behind the demonic clouds. Dark demonic aura seeped out of the space like a tide and spread toward the army of gods. The army of gods did not want to be outdone and fought back. The two sides were almost evenly matched. Higher up in the sky, a dim yellow sea of sand appeared and merged with the thick darkness to annihilate it. This battle lasted for an unknown period of time. The experts of the demon world and the army of gods were both injured. The dim yellow sea of sand in the sky and the thick darkness that couldn't be dispersed separated. Then, 3 figures appeared. One of them was holding a dark yellow longsword. Even the blade of the sword was golden. The other 2 figures were surrounded by a monstrous demonic aura. "That's the Sword of Time." Yin Nuashing couldn't help but exclaim when he saw the dark yellow longsword with sand falling from it. The image stopped abruptly. Then, in the last scene, Yin Nuashing was shocked to see that the Sword of Time was broken. The body of the sword and the hilt were separated, and the thick black fog disappeared. The figure holding the time sand sword hugged the body of the sword and the hilt, and quickly disappeared into the horizon with the army of gods. Is this the reason why the Sword of Time is only left with the hilt? It was broken in the battle with the demon army. Yin Nuashing's eyes were filled with shock. He couldn't help but mutter to himself. How fierce was the battle that even the divine sword that was ranked 4th in the divine sword record was broken. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sigh. How did the Dark Ruin sword and Ling Hong's sword get broken? They were almost completely destroyed. After the image disappeared, the space where Yun Nuo was turned into darkness. Just when he thought that it was over, his line of sight once again fluctuated, causing him to be slightly startled. He hurriedly focused, and then an image slowly appeared in his line of sight. That was an incomparably gigantic great hall. The great hall was filled with people, both young and old. Their gazes were all filled with malice as they stared at the silver figure in the center of the great hall. That somewhat frail and beautiful figure had a head full of long black hair. There was a silver hairband that tied 3 strands of hair down to her waist. The remaining strands of hair fell past her perky buttocks and landed on her thighs. That pair of silver eyes seemed to reveal the identity of this person. Yin Nuoxing also looked at the image in shock. That person should be Dingming Yu. She had silver eyes. However, looking at her appearance, she seemed to be a young girl. He estimated that she was only in her teens. You don't deserve to be a member of the Ding family. The symbol of the Ding family is the silver bloodline. However, yours is bright red. Alien, banish her. The girl in the center of the hall coldly surveyed the people around her with her silver eyes. After that, she turned around indifferently and walked out of the hall. At the entrance, her father and mother brought her away from the so-called Ding family with tears in their eyes and disappeared without a trace. After this memory, she drifted without a fixed residence. However, there was nothing too special. This is Senior Ding's memory, right? Yin Nuoxing scratched his head in shock. What was going on? Why did Senior Ding's memory appear in front of him? After a while, the image suddenly disappeared. Yin Nuoxing was puzzled, but at the same time, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. However, before he could completely relax, his line of sight changed again. A huge mansion appeared in front of him. On the mansion, there was a huge signboard with 2 huge words written on it. Lin Mansion. This child is on the verge of death. It's probably impossible to save him. It's a pity for this genius of the Lin Mansion. Family head, please restrain your grief. No, he can still be saved. He must still be saved. That's right, use that. That will definitely work. You're crazy. This child hasn't even reached the Pantheon realm. He hasn't even developed mental strength. His vitality is far from that strong. You want to reattach that piece of unknown origin. Yes. Sheng Er's spine is already broken. That piece of bone happens to be a spinal bone, and the shape matches. No, this is the only way. But family head, even if that spinal bone has incredible healing power, if young Master Lin Sheng can't withstand the pain, he will collapse. Yes, Sheng will definitely be able to pull through. Please, Sheng, live on. In the image, a young figure was lying on a wide stone platform. The flesh on his back was lacerated. Under the flesh were shattered pieces of bone. The stone platform was stained with blood. Beside the stone platform stood several figures. One of them was a middle-aged man. He was holding a golden spinal bone and placing it on the young figure's bloody back. As soon as the golden spinal bone touched the young figure's back, it began to reconnect with the bones on both ends. The torn flesh on the back was also healing at an astonishing speed. The image stopped there. When he heard the name Yin Nuoxing, he knew that this was probably related to Lin Sheng's memory. The image did not stop there. Instead, it played several more scenes, almost exposing all of Lin Sheng's secrets. Yin Nuoxing watched these scenes suspiciously. He was a little confused. Then, the image of Lin Sheng ended. After that, he saw Chuan Mu's memory, Lin Kuei's memory, Zhong Songling's memory, and Jun Luoyi's memory. Then, he saw Little Moon's memory. He saw himself, who had just landed in the desert and was brought to the Qin family. He could not help but feel nostalgic. Time passed quickly. Yer also had a memory. It was a black secret room. The sky outside was sometimes dark and sometimes red and black. It reminded Yin Nuoxing of the little black room that Yer had mentioned before. After these memories were played, Yin Nuoxing stretched his back and tilted his head. He was still a little confused. He felt like he had peeped on someone else's secret. This is everyone's secret? Peeping? At this thought, the smile on Yin Nuoxing's face suddenly froze. Then, the image in front of him changed rapidly again. He saw a mansion. Yin Nuoxing still had an impression of this mansion because it was Xian's home in Xianyu City, the Xian family. As expected, he was involved in the changes in the image. There was also the matter of the 5 elements body going berserk. If that's the case, isn't it my turn next? Yin Nuoxing laughed dryly. What was this? Chapter 686. In the dark void, the scenes kept changing and memories kept replaying. Yin Washing looked at the memories and could not help but laugh bitterly. After a part of Ziyan's memory was replayed, the surroundings returned to darkness again, and it remained so for a long time. It was as if there was no movement, which made Yin Washing stunned. According to the script, shouldn't his memory be replayed next? Could it be that they are his own memories, so they are not replaying them? Is this the special reward for stepping onto the 33rd step? Unfortunately, I don't have such a hobby. Yin Nuashing smiled and shook his head. However, just as he thought that nothing would happen, a glowing figure flickered and appeared in front of him, causing Yin Nuashing to be stunned. He turned his gaze and looked at the glowing figure, frowning slightly. The glowing figure dissipated slightly, and a gray-clothed young man appeared. From his appearance, he was naturally the owner of the maze. Elder. Yin Nuashing cupped his hands and greeted him softly. The young man in gray waved his hand and looked at Yin Nuashing mockingly. He chuckled and said, "How does it feel to peek at other people's secrets?" Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and shook his head. He sighed and said, "I don't have such a hobby. Who doesn't have a little secret? It's more mysterious to keep a secret, isn't it? Where's the sense of mystery?" The gray-clothed young man laughed when he heard this. Then he said, "You have quite a big secret, too. TSK, TSK, TSK. If I wasn't already dead, I would definitely catch you." Yin Nuashing's expression changed drastically, and he frowned. "You peeked at my memories? Hey, brat, don't call me peeping. I'll know everything about you the moment you step on the 33rd step. I've already been dead for a few epochs. They say that only the dead can keep secrets. What are you afraid of when I'm already dead?" The young man in gray looked at him strangely when he saw the change in his tone and expression. "But you are really powerful. Hee. So you came for the Sword of Time." The gray-clothed youth smiled as he looked at Yin Nuashing. It was as if nothing could hide from Yin Nuashing's black eyes. "That's right. So I'll have to trouble you to tell me where the body of the Sword of Time sand is." Yin Nuashing put her hands on her hips and rolled her eyes. Although what he said was reasonable, it still sounded weird. We'll talk about this later." The gray-clothed young man smiled and waved his hand. His black eyes sized up Yin Nuashing before he laughed strangely and said, "I wonder what will happen if your companion finds out about your secret? The way she looks at you will definitely change." "How dare you?" Yin Nuashing's expression changed drastically. She clenched her fist and almost pulled out the Nethervoid sword. However, when she saw the other party's teasing gaze, she could not help but grit her teeth. This bastard actually had the intention to tease her. "You're so conflicted, but don't your little girlfriend and those 3 little girls all know about it? As for the other little girl, who's that? That little girl from the Xianlong continent also knows a little about your secret, right? Why don't you have such a big conflict?" The gray-clothed young man walked around the Yun Nua planet, looked at him with a strange expression, and said with a smile, "Or are you shy? Scram." Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes and said angrily, "I feel that. I don't know either. There are always some things that I don't want them to know. The girls have been following me around in the realm of the gods for a long time. How can I not trust them?" Yes. That's why you don't trust these people whom you have just met." The gray-clothed young man smiled again. Yin Nuashing suddenly became mute. She opened her mouth a few times, but no words came out. After a long while, she scratched her head angrily and said, "These are 2 different things." Yes, they're indeed 2 different things. For example, I told you that the body of the temporal sand sword was on the 19th floor, but I didn't tell you where it was. These are 2 different things. However, I did tell you that it was on the 19th floor. The gray-clothed young man smiled and snapped his fingers. "It's in the Oracle Crystal Pillar, right?" Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes and said, "The only thing worth paying attention to in the entire 19th floor is the Oracle Crystal Pillar. Could it be that you sealed the body of the temporal sandsword in there? There are so many people cultivating there. Those people are all acting as keys or nourishment, right? Are you repairing the temporal sandsword?" Clap, clap. Hearing her answer, the gray-clothed young man suddenly clapped his hands. Moreover, the more he clapped, the louder his claps became. He looked very excited. Then, he laughed loudly and said, "Smart. Very smart. 10 out of 10 is 8. There's still a little difference." As expected of a divine weapon, divine sword Netherworld and Ling Hong's previous owner. Haha, very smart. With the temporal sand sword that you're about to get, you'll become the first person in the history of the god world to have multiple divine weapons other than the blacksmith. The gray-clothed young man couldn't help but hold his stomach and laugh. However, getting a divine sword might not be a good thing. After a while, the gray-clothed young man's expression changed slightly. He actually calmed down a lot. "What do you mean?" Yin Nuoxing frowned in confusion. "You saw the battle just now, right? The battle with the demon world." The gray-clothed young man let out a long sigh. After a pause, he continued, "That was a battle that lasted several years. I was also the previous owner of the temporal sand sword. During that battle, the temporal sand sword was destroyed in my hands. The opponent was too strong, so I used the temporal sand sword to its limit. If not for that, the god world would have been in danger during that battle. The demon world would have torn a hole in the god world, and behind it would have been the endless god world." Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing's expression changed slightly. Although she had guessed it before, she was still a little shocked when the gray-clothed young man admitted it personally. The gray-clothed young man let out a long sigh and said faintly, "One day, you'll also know that you'll have to bear the heavy responsibility of the world. That's the responsibility you received when you got the divine weapon. When that time comes, you'll have to weigh the existence of this world." After a while, the young man's expression became very strange. He looked at Yin Nuoxing and grinned. "Do you think I'm right? Since the creation of the god world, the 9th recorded in history, spiritual, godly physique." Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. However, since the gray-clothed young man said that he had seen his memories, it was inevitable that he knew about it. How would I know? The Nethervoid sword had always been by my side when I came out from there. Ling Hongjian was also found by accident. It's not up to me to care about such a noble thing. Since you've seen my memories, you should also know that my soul has been tainted by the devil. I can fall to the devil at any time. Forgive me for not being able to bear the responsibility of this era." Yin Nuoxing crossed her arms in front of her chest and said impatiently, "Huh." The gray-clothed young man let out a meaningful laugh. Then, he took a deep breath and said, "By accident? Do you really think that you obtained Ling Hongjian by accident?" Yin Nuoxing frowned slightly. "What do you mean? The providence in your body is very abnormal. It's not something that a person can possess. If there's an upper limit to this world's providence, and if this world's providence is the sum of the providence of all living beings in this world, then you alone possess 1/10 of this world's providence." The gray-clothed young man looked very agitated. This is the result of someone changing it. To be more precise, the person behind you and changing your providence must be a god. Yin Nuoxing's eyebrows twitched because she remembered the golden figure's words. The gray-clothed young man seemed to have thought of this as well. He couldn't help but let out an evil laugh. He held his head with his hand and laughed a little crazily. "Ha! I forgot. You are the successor of a god. You have 2 god imprints on your body. There are actually 2 gods protecting you. Moreover, those 2 are great heavenly godlike existences. 2 gods?" Yin Nuoxing was stunned. Then, she subconsciously touched the black pearl between her eyebrows. She suddenly realized something and said, "Xian Yin and the one in the pink dress?" The gray-clothed young man smiled and nodded. "No wonder you have such great providence. You are the successor of a god. It's normal for them to seize all the providence of this world for you. Don't make it sound so bad." Yin Nuoxing frowned. "Is it bad? That's the truth. How long do gods live? One person can experience the vicissitudes of life countless times. They have seen the mortal world change countless times. What's worth their attention is nothing more than their loved ones and the people around them. Other people have nothing to do with them and can't accompany them in their lives. What's the difference between them and those mortals? They're all people whose lifespans are determined by the heavens. They're all people who are about to die. The gray-clothed young man laughed crazily. Yin Nuoxing frowned deeply. However, she really couldn't refute this point, because what the gray-clothed young man said didn't seem to be wrong. Haha, how about it? Why don't you release your memories and let your companions have a look? Those super secrets that are enough to shake the world of the gods. If people know about them, perhaps those transcendental forces will send people to capture you. The gray-clothed young man smiled and changed the topic. Yin Nuoxing's face darkened. She couldn't help but scold softly, scram. However, your obsession is really terrifying. You want to use the power of a demon to fight against a high-level god. I guess you're not the only one who has such a crazy idea since ancient times. However, you do indeed have the power to do this. Or rather, you have the power now. This is also the reason why you want to obtain the time sand sword. The gray-clothed young man smiled and waved his hand as if they were chatting normally. However, what they were talking about was the deepest and most deeply buried secret in Yin Nuoxing's heart. Yin Nuoxing opened her mouth, but the gray-clothed young man beat her to it and said, "Nothing is set in stone. At least you haven't fallen to the dark side yet, right? Why are you so sure that you will fall to the dark side? Basically, it's because you are afraid. You are worried that you, who have such great power, will use that destructive power against the people around you after you fall to the dark side. The shackles of this kind of thought will become tighter as your power increases. Until now, you no longer have the courage to take that step. You are like a puppet being pushed by the clock. Even if you don't move forward, time will slowly push you forward. You will eventually have to take that step. If you fall to the dark side, you have 1/10 of the fate of heaven and earth. If this fate isn't enough to protect you and make it through the dark side safely, then it can only mean that it is predestined." Yin Nuoxing's expression became more and more gloomy as he spoke, and his brows furrowed deeper and deeper. In this dark space, it was as if the darkness was the spokesperson of his heart, and his state of mind was also dark and gloomy. You could have broken through to the demigod rank more than a year ago. Why didn't you try? The gray-clothed young man also frowned. He was naturally referring to the time when she was cultivating in the Monarch Mountain star domain. How could I have tried? Yin Nuoxing gritted her teeth and clenched her fists tightly. She lowered her head, and her bangs covered her face. Then, she suddenly roared hysterically. "There is no turning back. When I found out about this, I was already on this path. There is no turning back. What could I have done? What could I have done? Let myself fall to the dark side. Then let me use the swirling zither to destroy the Source Peak region. Or let me use an infinitely multiplying array to destroy the realm of the gods. I fell to the dark side once. Once I was possessed by chaos. The two experiences have given me the urge to destroy everything in my path. I couldn't control that feeling at all. When the time comes, who will stop me from falling into a state of madness?" Yin Nuoxing roared to his heart's content. It was as if he had vented all the pent-up emotions he had been suppressing all these years. He panted heavily and couldn't help but murmur, "Who can stop me? Calm down and listen to me. There are ways to recover from the dark side. In the demigod rank, every small breakthrough is a metamorphosis. If it's you, you might be able to do it." The gray-robed youth took 2 steps forward and patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder. He said softly, "I want you to try to go from the demigod rank to the demigod rank in one go. When that happens, the transformation of divinity will basically eliminate all negative effects in the body, including the soul. At that time, the fallen might also recover." Hearing this, even Yin Nuoxing was shocked by his own madness. "If that's the case, first, you'll have to awaken your divinity in the demigod rank. Then, you'll have to open up a special space in your body to store enough energy. At the same time, you'll have to open up your meridians and energy carriers to break through in one go. In the worst-case scenario, you'll have to undergo both the transformation of divinity and the transformation of divinity at the same time. That kind of pain will torture you to the point of insanity, no matter how determined you are. You know quite a bit." Hearing this, the gray-robed youth was pleasantly surprised. He patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder. Yin Nuoxing didn't feel happy at all because of his praise. Her colorful eyes dimmed again. She sighed softly and slowly talked about her own matters. When I found out that I might fall into the dark side, I started to suppress my own cultivation. However, I didn't want to give up on cultivation, so I changed the goal of my cultivation. At that time, I was glad that I had a spiritual, godly body. My sensitivity to energy made it very easy for me to cultivate anything. Whether it was weapons, godly arts, or godly mystic arts, I set my goal on mystic arts and mystic arts. So far, I've only cultivated godly mystic arts and mystic arts. The treasures that Xian Yin gave me were all piled up on the ground. It helped me achieve my goal. It was also at that time that I had that kind of idea. With my mortal body, I wanted to tear the pride of those high-level gods to shreds. Yin Nuoxing laughed crazily. Then, she covered her face and laughed as if she was laughing at herself. I did it. However, later on, I found that my cultivation couldn't be sealed. Because I had a spiritual, godly body, even if I sealed all my senses to energy, my cultivation still continued to grow. It was also at that time that I found that I couldn't stop. I even subconsciously cultivated and sped up the time to break through to the dark side. On one side was the idea that I wanted to achieve with all my strength. On the other side was the darkness that would drive me crazy. What should I do? I don't know. There was a period of time when I was very dispirited. Although I pretended that nothing was wrong, Xian and the others didn't see it. During that time, I put all my energy into research. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh. She tapped her temple with her finger and said, "The knowledge of the mythological era is still very useful. The ancient god's bloodline and the fragments of the god's knowledge allowed me to understand the language of the mythological era. I obtained 8,000 books of the mythological era from the underwater ruins under the Sea King City, the ruins of Rain Country. They became the source of most of my knowledge. No wonder you know so much knowledge that shouldn't be available in this era." The gray-clothed youth looked at her in surprise. Although he said that he saw everything about Yin Nuoxing, there were so many memories that he wouldn't look at them carefully. Because those scenes were his entire life, enough for him to look at for more than 10 years. Yin Nuoxing scratched her head, nodded, and said softly, "I only think of everything in the worst way, and then force myself to have the power to solve that situation." Hearing this, the gray-clothed youth's expression changed slightly. He let out a long sigh and said, "You child, you've been forcing yourself to stay in the abyss of despair. No wonder you can achieve this. But you're too extreme. If you continue like this, you'll drive yourself crazy first. Although your obsession is incomparably strong, the strength of the dark side and the body of the dark side are ultimately shackles that block most of your potential. No wonder people say that you're a lunatic, you're really crazy." After a while, he let out a long sigh and patted her shoulder, saying, "But these are all guesses between you and me. Whether you can succeed or not, whether you're willing to try or not, it's up to you. Do you want to struggle desperately in despair, or stop here and sink into despair? But no matter what, one day you will also step into that stage." That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.